Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Mackenzie Lueck. Mackenzie Lueck was born on March 8, 1996, to Diana and Gregory Lueck. Her father worked in healthcare logistics and administration, and her mother was a homemaker. Mackenzie grew up in El Segundo, a city in Los Angeles County, California, with an older brother and two younger brothers. Mackenzie attended El Segundo High School, where she was a member of the swim team and played water polo. Mackenzie was a hardworking student with a strong interest in art, music, and animals. Mackenzie attended the University of Utah, where she majored in kinesiology and nursing and was a member of the Alpha Kappa Omega sorority. While in college, Mackenzie shared her feminist views and switched her political orientation from major party to conservative third party. Mackenzie worked at a biotesting company in Salt Lake City. Mackenzie wanted to pursue a career in health sciences, discussed with her counselors plans to attend nursing or medical school, and expected to graduate in May 2020. The Mackenzie family lived a normal life until everything changed on June 17, 2019. On that day, Mackenzie returned to Salt Lake City, Utah, after her grandmother's funeral. She arrived at Salt Lake City International Airport around 2 a.m. and texted her mother, "Just landed and love you, Mom." When her mother Diana answered a few moments later, Diana discovered that Mackenzie's phone was turned off. Her father Gregory also tried to call Mackenzie but was routed to her voicemail, causing Mackenzie's family to become very concerned for her safety. On June 20th, Mackenzie's parents realized that her friends had not seen or heard from her either. Mackenzie's friends reported her missing to the Salt Lake City Police Department. Over the next 2 weeks, while Mackenzie's parents Diana, Gregory, and their 3 sons tried everything they could to find Mackenzie in California, Mackenzie's Alpha Kappa Omega sorority sisters organized search efforts in Utah. They even created a Facebook page called Find Mackenzie Lueck to attract national media attention to the case. As police searched for clues about Mackenzie, they discovered video footage of Mackenzie at the airport. She was then picked up by a Lyft driver and taken to Hatch Park in North Salt Lake, about 13 miles away. Police checked Mackenzie's cell phone records, confirming that Mackenzie had been at the park. Police also discovered that Mackenzie had exchanged several text messages with a person named Aay, whom she had allegedly met on a dating website and planned to meet in person. Mackenzie's last text message to Aay was sent at 2:58 a.m. Cell phone records showed that both Mackenzie and Aay were at Hatch Park at the same time. Notably, at 2:59 a.m., Mackenzie's phone stopped transmitting data or location information, indicating that the phone had been turned off. Police tracked Aay's cell phone signal, which led them from the park to his home at 547 North 1000 West in a Fair Park neighborhood. Police found that Aay's cell phone was at his home at 3:07 a.m., just 7 to 8 minutes after he picked up Mackenzie from the park. Since Aay was the prime suspect in Mackenzie's disappearance, police decided to execute a search warrant at his home. During the search, police discovered a newly dug area in the backyard. Inside this area, they found burned human bones, muscle tissue, and charred personal items. In a nearby alley, police also discovered charred fabric and other items belonging to the victim. After the DNA from the bones matched the DNA profile of the items found, police identified the victim as Mackenzie. A neighbor reported a foul odor coming from a campfire in Aay's backyard, which was also fueled by gasoline, on June 17th and again on June 18th. This is where police found a shallow grave containing bones and tissue. Police impounded Aay's car after detecting a strong smell of gasoline and finding a red gas can in the trunk. They discovered that a can of gasoline had been purchased at a local store at 9 a.m. the day Mackenzie went missing. After arresting Aay, police checked his cell phone records, which showed Aay's phone was in Logan Canyon, a location where he buried Mackenzie's body on June 25th. Between 2:30 p.m. and 4:30 p.m. police searched the area and found freshly disturbed soil in a wooded area near the main road, where they discovered a charred human body. On July 3rd, the medical examiner confirmed that the body was that of Mackenzie. Her hands had been bound behind her back with zip ties and rope. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the left side of the skull, and her death was classified as a homicide. On October 7, 2020, Aay pleaded guilty to first-degree aggravated murder and third-degree indignity to a human body in connection with Mackenzie's death. Aay was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus 5 years for indecent assault on Mackenzie. Aay was also charged with kidnapping another woman in March 2018, whom Aay met on a dating website. In addition, Aay was charged with 19 counts of sexual exploitation of a minor. These charges arose in August 2019 when police discovered child pornography on Aay's computer while investigating Mackenzie's death on July 2nd. The images reportedly showed children aged between 4 and 8. On October 1st, 2020, Aay pleaded not guilty to these charges and the pornography charges were eventually dismissed. The tragic death of Mackenzie Lueck has had a profound impact on her family, friends, and the entire nation. Her cheerful personality, zest for life, and desire to make a positive impact were suddenly ended by a senseless act of violence. Mackenzie's story serves as an important reminder to always be cautious and safe, especially when using online dating services. Rest in peace, Mackenzie Lueck. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Marina Menegazzo and Maria Jose Coney. Marina Menegazzo, 21, and Maria Jose Coney, 22, embarked on a highly anticipated trip in 2016. Little did they know that this journey would turn into one of the most high-profile investigations in Latin America over the past decade. At the time, Maria Jose Coney was studying economics at the National University of Cuyo, while Marina Menegazzo was pursuing a degree in speech therapy at Aconcagua University. Both girls volunteered at an organization that supported people living on the streets. Those who knew them described the girls as cheerful and close to their families. The two friends, along with 2 others, set off on a journey on January 10th. After splitting up with their companions, Marina and Maria Jose continued on their own. Their route could be tracked through Maria Jose's Instagram posts. On January 13th, they were in Cusco, the former capital of the Inca Empire in Peru. The next day, an image was posted, also taken in Cusco. Another image was published on January 15th, showing the girls on a railway bridge near the Machu Picchu hydroelectric power plant. The ancient Inca city of Machu Picchu, known as the City Above the Clouds, is one of Peru's most famous attractions and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Based on their Instagram activity, it appears the girls spent several days in the area. On January 18th, Maria shared 2 more photos from her current location. The next day, January 19th, she bid farewell to Cusco by posting an image. By January 23rd, the girls had already arrived in Manta, Ecuador, where Maria posted a photo taken on Monita Beach. Over the next 10 days, they traveled along Ecuador's coast and then headed inland. On February 4th, Maria posted a photo from San Antonio, followed by one from Banos on February 6th. On February 10th, Maria shared a photo featuring all 4 girls, marking the end of their journey that began on January 10th. This farewell post came as 2 girls from the group prepared to return home to Argentina. Maria Jose Coney and Marina Menegazzo still had around 10 days of vacation left, so they decided to take their time and revisit Montanita, where their Ecuadorian adventure had first begun. On February 22nd, Maria uploaded a photo of herself with Marina to her Instagram account, which was her last post. That same day, the girls informed their families in Argentina that they would be returning home soon. They outlined their travel plans, which involved taking a bus from Ecuador to Lima, Peru, where they would spend the night at a friend's house. From there, they would fly to Santiago, Chile on February 25th, and then take a bus to their hometown of Mendoza, Argentina. The girls also warned their relatives that they would have limited phone signal for a couple of days, making it difficult to contact them. However, as the days passed, their relatives were unable to reach them, and there was no activity on their social media accounts. This led to growing concern among their relatives. Marina's sister was the first to draw attention to this case on social media, posting a photo of two girls with a plea for help. The caption read, "My sister and her friend vanished on Monday 22nd in Montita, Ecuador. Please share this information." The families of the missing girls wanted to know if they had left the country and boarded their flight, but the airline refused to provide any information, stating they would only disclose this after receiving a court order. Furthermore, the friends with whom the girls had planned to spend the night before their departure reported that they never showed up. As a result, Marina and Maria's relatives contacted the emergency services in Ecuador to report the disappearance, and also reached out to the Argentine consulate for assistance. On February 27th, the consulate stepped in to help with the case. Argentina's authorities had sent fingerprints of both girls to Ecuador for a specific reason. Just a few days earlier, on February 25th, the body of an unknown woman was discovered in Montanita and taken to Gil. By comparing the fingerprints provided by the Argentine police with those of the unidentified body, it was determined that the body was that of Maria José Coni. On Saturday, February 27th, the police examined the area where Maria's body was found and discovered the body of Marina Manazo just 43 yards away. Both bodies were wrapped in plastic bags and bound with duct tape. According to the Ecuadorian police, Marina's body was initially hidden from view by the perpetrator, who attempted to conceal it by placing an object on top of it. The autopsy revealed that Maria José died from blunt force trauma to the head, and she had genital injuries, a broken femur, and a broken toe. Additionally, marks on her wrists suggested that she was tied up. Marina Manazo died from 6 stab wounds to the neck, and she also had marks on her wrists, indicating that she too was tied up. The reports concluded that the girls died on February 23rd. The toxicological analysis showed that their blood contained a large amount of a psychiatric medication, suggesting that they did not take the drug voluntarily and may not have even known they had consumed it. This implies that someone may have added the drug to their food or drinks. Only 24 hours after the second body was discovered, a major breakthrough in the case sparked a range of reactions from the girls' families, the president, and Ecuador's interior minister. The police had apprehended 33-year-old Alberto Segundo Mina Ponce and 39-year-old Aurelio Eduardo Rodriguez, who confessed to the crimes and recounted the events in detail. Bloodstains were found at Mina Ponce's residence, and Marina's mobile phone, backpack, and other belongings were discovered nearby. What was particularly striking, apart from the swift arrest, was the defendant's immediate confession. This development resonated with those following the case. According to their account, the men described exactly what had happened. Ecuador's Interior Minister, José Serrano, stated that the girls had left the hotel where they were staying on February 22nd at 2 p.m. after being robbed of all their money. They had planned to hitchhike to Lima, but this version was disputed by the hotel owner, who denied that anyone had stolen from the girls. The families of Maria and Marina also questioned this story, as the girls had credit cards with no activity recorded on them. It is possible that someone stole the cash and credit cards from the girls, but they still had access to their account funds, which they could have used to pay for things online, such as booking a trip. However, they did not do so. According to Ecuador's Minister of the Interior, the girls visited a bar and asked the owner for a couple of glasses of water because they were thirsty and had no money. The bar owner confirmed this, stating that she gave them water because they were penniless. Whether someone actually stole all of Maria and Marina's money remains unclear. The minister elaborated on the events, referencing the confessions of the suspects. According to Ponce, around 8 p.m. on that day, Rodriguez told him about two Argentine girls he had met at a bar. Ponce and Rodriguez approached the girls, Marina and Maria, and struck up a conversation. The girls claimed they were hitchhiking to Lima because they couldn't afford bus fare. However, this account raises several questions, as the girls had already purchased plane tickets from Lima to Santiago, Chile, and were due to depart on February 25th. Local police found witnesses who corroborated this version of events. The girls needed a place to stay for the night, but they lacked the money for a hotel or hostel. Ponce offered to let them spend the night at his house, and they accepted. A taxi driver confirmed that he had driven Marina, Maria, and Ponce to the house. According to the Ecuadorian authorities, Ponce then returned to the bar with Rodriguez, leaving Marina and Maria alone in the house. The heavily intoxicated men returned home around 2:30 a.m., but Maria and Marina were not there. The police investigation revealed that the girls had gone to a nearby store to buy soda, which was confirmed by the store cashier. According to Ponce's testimony, when the girls returned to the house, Ponce stayed in a room with Maria Coney, while Rodriguez was in another room with Marina Manago. Ponce wanted to persuade Maria to have intimate relations with him, but she resisted and tried to leave the house. Ponce then grabbed a stick and hit Maria on the head, causing her to die instantly. At the same moment, he heard a scream coming from the other room. When he entered the room, he saw that Rodriguez had killed Marina. Rodriguez immediately left the house afterwards. Ponce admitted that he then started thinking about how to dispose of the bodies. He attempted to remove all traces of evidence from the house and wrap the bodies in plastic bags using duct tape. In the afternoon, he borrowed a cart from an acquaintance and transported the bodies to a deserted area near the ocean shore, approximately 440 yards from his home. The authorities discovered several inconsistencies in the case. Despite the marks on the girls' wrists, there was no explanation. Furthermore, the toxicological analysis revealed that both girls had traces of a potent drug in their blood. The girls' families suspected a possible link to human trafficking and believed that the Ecuadorian authorities were involved in a cover-up. The families had several reasons to doubt the official story. Firstly, the girls had run out of money, yet they hadn't used their credit cards. Secondly, they were under the influence of drugs. Notably, the only witnesses who saw Maria and Marina that day were the ones who corroborated the authorities' version of events. It seemed strange that the bodies were found 2 days apart, only 43 yards from each other, in a town with just 5,000 residents. Additionally, it was peculiar that Maria and Marina sought help from Ponce and Rodriguez, given that there were many Argentine tourists in Monita, and it would have been more logical for the girls to approach someone from their own country for assistance. The brother of one of the victims reported seeing used syringes on the floor when the Ecuadorian police took him to the crime scene, but these syringes later vanished, and the experts who examined the area claimed they never existed. The family believes that the two accused men were just a diversion from a larger issue, possibly human trafficking. A second autopsy and new toxicology tests were scheduled by the authorities. It was also discovered that both defendants repeatedly altered their accounts of what happened. In one version, Mina Ponce denied involvement in the crime, stating that the perpetrator was a Venezuelan illegal substance dealer known as El Chamo, who lived in the area. The police arrested this man, but he claimed to have no connection to the incident and was willing to take a polygraph test or provide a DNA sample. Several DNA samples were recovered at the crime scene, including those from Mina Ponce and the two deceased girls. Additionally, there were multiple unidentified DNA samples that did not match Rodriguez, the alleged accomplice, nor El Chamo, who was cleared as a suspect following thorough DNA testing. The second autopsy, performed by Argentine experts, revealed that both girls were in a vulnerable state and unable to defend themselves prior to their deaths, indicating they were coerced into sexual activity. The autopsy also showed that Maria Jose had bruises and scratches exclusively on one side of her body, suggesting she may have been thrown from a moving vehicle. Furthermore, a new toxicology report confirmed that both girls had been drugged with a potent substance used in psychiatric treatment, which can suppress a person's will. Next, a reaction swept across Latin America. Sadly, a common phenomenon occurred. People placed the blame for their deaths on the girls themselves. Not only did ordinary internet users do this, but so did prominent public figures. One notable example is Maria Cristina Rivera, the Deputy Minister of Tourism for Ecuador. During the same period when news of Maria and Marina's deaths was circulating, Berlin hosted a tourism fair. Rivera gave an interview to a German news agency, but stating that the way the girls traveled made it inevitable that something bad would happen to them. She also commented that she had never visited Manita, as it didn't align with her social status. This was a disturbing case of victim blaming at the state level. Following Rivera's interview, the Ecuadorian government issued an apology to the families of Maria and Marina and terminated the woman's employment. The Argentine psychiatrist, Hugo Martin, faced intense criticism for his remarks, in which he referred to the girls as favorable victims and suggested that they somehow provoked others into committing crimes. Martin later claimed that his words had been misinterpreted, stating that he never intended to imply that criminals were not responsible for their actions. The trial, which began on August 8, 2016, was plagued by setbacks, including 3 changes in prosecutors, significantly delaying the process. Despite these challenges, the prosecution presented a substantial amount of evidence, including over 200 pieces of physical evidence from the crime scene and witness statements. The police had discovered some of the girls' personal belongings, biological fluids, and phones at the crime scene and in the adjacent house. Throughout the trial, Ponce maintained his innocence, claiming that his initial confession was made under police pressure. This assertion only fueled the suspicion of the girls' families, who believed that the Ecuadorian authorities were concealing information. Rodriguez, meanwhile, altered his testimony, implicating Colombian drug dealers in the girls' deaths. In the first week of the trial, the prosecutor revealed that additional individuals may have been involved, as the police had found 3 more male DNA samples at the scene, in addition to those of Rodriguez and Ponce. Ultimately, the court handed down the maximum sentence under Ecuadorian law, sentencing both Alberto Ponce and Eduardo Rodriguez to 40 years in prison. In November 2016, Ecuadorian authorities arrested José Luis Pérez Castro, a 34-year-old man, after finding his DNA at the crime scene. According to his defense, Castro had lived in the house a few weeks prior to the incident, and his blood was found on the wall due to a dental infection. The lawyers also claimed that Castro's DNA was found on the girls' bodies because he had touched furniture or objects that the police had also touched. However, Castro's defense began to fall apart when a dentist testified. It emerged that Castro had visited the dentist, but only 2 weeks after the discovery of Marina and Maria's bodies. Castro asked the dentist for a note confirming his dental infection, but the dentist refused, finding no health issues during the examination. The dentist ultimately kicked Castro out. José Luis Castro, like Alberto Ponce and Eduardo Rodriguez, was sentenced to 40 years in prison, despite maintaining his innocence until the end. The girls' families questioned the official account provided by the Ecuadorian authorities, even though the families had ensured that Argentine police officers were involved in the investigation. The Ecuadorian authorities' version of events has remained unchanged, and the search for other individuals whose DNA samples were found at the house is still ongoing to this day. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Natasha Cournoyer. Natasha Cournoyer, a 37-year-old woman, disappeared mysteriously. She didn't visit her mother, didn't answer phone calls, and wasn't at home. Her friends and colleagues didn't see her that day either. By 5 p.m., her relatives reported her missing, and the police launched an investigation. As a public relations specialist, Natasha worked for the Correctional Service of Canada. The detectives started by visiting her workplace to interview her colleagues. They discovered Natasha's car still parked nearby, with a man named Michel Trottier lingering around it. Appearing nervous, Trottier claimed to have a romantic relationship with Natasha and was trying to figure out where she might have gone. Scratches were found on the back door of Natasha's car, but it was unclear whether they were related to her disappearance or had existed before. The detectives didn't find any reason to suspect Trottier's involvement in Natasha's disappearance. After conducting interviews with Natasha's co-workers, investigators learned that she was at work on October 1, 2009, the day before she vanished. Her colleagues reported that her behavior that day was completely normal. She was in a good mood and interacted with them in a friendly manner, as she always did. Natasha had scheduled a day off for October 2nd to take care of some personal business related to her father's recent passing. She needed to finalize arrangements for his tombstone. As a result, she stayed at the office longer than usual on October 1st, ultimately leaving the building around 8 p.m. Natasha's friends portrayed her as a kind and open person who didn't have any conflicts or enemies. She worked in an office environment and didn't have any involvement with prisoners, making it hard to imagine anyone holding a grudge against her. The police launched a massive search operation to locate Natasha Cournoyer, deploying both air and canine units. They scoured the area surrounding the parking lot, but unfortunately did not uncover any leads that could aid the investigation. Meanwhile, Natasha's friends and family distributed flyers featuring her photo, hoping that someone might have information about her disappearance or have seen her. The initial hours following a person's disappearance are crucial, as this is when witnesses or evidence are most likely to be found. However, in Natasha's case, valuable time was lost because the police didn't receive the report until the evening of October 2nd, a full 21 hours after she had left her workplace. Natasha's family offered a $10,000 reward for any information that could help locate her. Michel Trottier, Natasha's boyfriend, suspected she had been kidnapped and made a televised plea to her possible abductor, asking them to release her. Meanwhile, the police investigated Michel and Natasha's personal lives, discovering that they had been in a troubled on-again, off-again relationship for 4 years. The police explored all possible scenarios behind Natasha's disappearance. After reviewing CCTV footage, the police were able to piece together Natasha's final day at work. She arrived at the building at 9:04 a.m. and left at 8:07 p.m., heading towards her parked car in a poorly lit area of the parking lot. At some point, Natasha vanished into the darkness. A few minutes later, the car's headlights turned on, and the vehicle began moving in the opposite direction of the exit. It stopped in another poorly lit area, and the headlights went out. The car remained there for about 20 minutes before moving towards the exit. However, it was not Natasha's Mazda. It was determined from other records that a Ford Windstar minivan appeared on the video. Further investigation revealed that this vehicle entered the parking lot at 6:35 p.m. and parked beside Natasha's car. Based on the video evidence, the police suspected that Natasha Cournoyer's disappearance was likely a kidnapping. By the 5th day of the search, on October 6, 2009, the investigation shifted from a missing person case to a homicide. Natasha's body was discovered in a vacant lot in the Point Aux Trumbull area, approximately 20 miles from her workplace. The body was found adjacent to a dirt road leading to the riverbank. Natasha's death sent shockwaves through her family and friends. The details of the medical examiner's report only made things worse. The cause of death was strangulation, but that was only the final act. Before that, she had been punched in the face 9 times, breaking her nose. Her wrists and ankles bore marks, indicating she had been restrained at some point. The presence of seminal fluid provided a DNA sample. As the detectives waited for the DNA analysis results, they focused on identifying the owner of the minivan seen on the day Natasha vanished. In 2009, 2 motels operated near her workplace. 10 days after the body was discovered, on October 16, 2009, police visited both motels, reviewing the guest registration cards. At the Lido Motel, they found a guest who had listed a Ford Windstar as his vehicle on the day Natasha Cournoyer went missing. The man was identified as 48-year-old Claude LaRouche, a registered sex offender with a criminal history. He had served 2 prison sentences, 1 year in prison plus 2 years of probation in 1993 for forcing a 19-year-old acquaintance into sexual intercourse, and 40 months in prison in 2005 for attempting to kidnap a 7-year-old girl who managed to escape his grasp and run to a neighbor's house. By November 2008, LaRouche was out of prison. He started working as a carpenter and got married to a woman with 2 sons in 2009. The family lived together in a house just a 10-minute drive from the parking lot where Natasha Cournoyer went missing. In their investigation, detectives found that LaRouche had checked into a motel on the night Natasha disappeared. They called in forensic experts to examine the motel room, where they discovered dark red stains on the carpet that had been poorly cleaned. The stains were sent for analysis. On the same day, detectives visited LaRouche's residence to question him. Since he had a prior criminal record, his DNA was already on file with the police. However, they needed time to compare it with the DNA evidence collected from Natasha's body. LaRouche claimed he didn't know Natasha Cournoyer, but admitted to frequenting the Lido Motel due to its affordability. He stated that he was unhappy with his marital life and would often rent a room at the motel to engage in paid sexual services. When asked about his whereabouts on October 1st, the day Natasha went missing, LaRouche said he had no recollection, including whether he had stayed at the Lido Motel that day. He attributed this memory gap to excessive drug use, but his memory suddenly returned a month later, on November 5, 2009. After the detectives revisited LaRouche, the DNA analysis revealed that the seminal fluid found on Natasha Cournoyer's body belonged to him. Furthermore, Natasha's DNA was discovered in the motel room he rented and inside his car. According to the Montreal police, there was no connection between the crime and Cournoyer's job as a communications officer for the Correctional Service of Canada, and the victim did not know the suspect. LaRouche's neighbors were shocked and disturbed by his arrest, describing him as a friendly and polite person. On November 6, 2009, Claude LaRouche was identified as a suspect in the disappearance and suspected murder of Natasha Cournoyer. Initially, he denied any involvement or wrongdoing, but later, faced with overwhelming evidence, he confessed to taking Natasha's life. However, he claimed that her death was unintentional and accidental. During the 2011 trial, 2 conflicting versions of events emerged, one from Claude LaRouche and his lawyers, and another from the prosecutor. According to LaRouche's testimony, he was waiting for a drug dealer in a parking lot when Natasha appeared beside him. LaRouche claimed that he attacked Natasha, forced her into his car, and drove to a motel where Natasha supposedly offered to comply with his demands in exchange for her freedom. Conveniently, LaRouche said he experienced memory lapses, remembering only the details that supported his innocence. LaRouche's account continued, stating that a dispute broke out in the motel room, causing him to lose control and attack Natasha, eventually strangling her. Afterwards, he cleaned the room, placed Natasha's body in his car, drove home, and went to bed. The next morning, when the effects of the drugs he had taken wore off, LaRouche realized the severity of his actions and decided to dispose of the body. He shredded Natasha's documents and bank cards, throwing them out of his car window while driving to the location where her body was eventually found. To clarify, this is Claude LaRouche's version of events, which raised many doubts as he continued to speak. According to LaRouche, he returned to the body the day after disposing of it, covering it with a blanket because he feared Natasha might freeze. The following day, he went back to retrieve the blanket, allegedly because he was concerned that the blanket would delay the discovery of Natasha's body. In summary, Claude LaRouche's account of events is plagued by inconsistencies and illogical actions, which were likely caused by his impaired mental state. Notably, LaRouche repeatedly emphasized during the trial that he never intended to harm Natasha. The prosecution built a strong case based on material evidence, which was corroborated by a key eyewitness. This witness testified that he was walking his dog near the parking lot on the day Natasha Cournoyer disappeared. He claimed to have seen Claude LaRouche attempting to attack a jogger, but LaRouche fled the scene when he noticed the witness and his dog. This incident occurred around 7 p.m., approximately an hour before Natasha Cournoyer was attacked. According to the prosecutor, LaRouche tied Natasha up and forcibly took her to a motel where she was eventually killed. In June 2011, the court found Claude LaRouche guilty and sentenced him to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 25 years. During the trial, it was revealed that Claude LaRouche had attempted to strangle another woman, Dominique Martel, just 2 weeks after attacking Natasha Cournoyer. Martel defended herself by biting his finger, managing to fight him off. As a result, LaRouche was classified as a dangerous criminal under Canadian law, implying he will likely remain incarcerated indefinitely with little chance of early release. Natasha led a happy, quiet life filled with dreams and ambitions. However, her life was tragically cut short by a man with a history of serious crimes who was free to roam among the public despite his record. Her family and friends cannot help but wonder how an individual who had previously attempted to kidnap a 7-year-old girl was allowed to walk free. They question why no one was monitoring him. If the system had functioned differently and LaRouche had been imprisoned as he should have been, Natasha might still be alive today. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kelly Clayton. Thomas "Tom" Clayton, a notable figure in Elmira, New York, played professional hockey for the Elmira Jackals in the United Hockey League, 2 tiers below the National Hockey League. As a result of his prominent role on the Jackals, Tom enjoyed local celebrity status in Elmira. Known for his agitating style of play, Tom would often provoke opposing players through verbal sparring or physical confrontations on the ice. This assertive and confident demeanor extended beyond the rink, as Tom fearlessly stood up for himself and defended his interests in his daily life. His on-ice reputation as a formidable player preceded him, warning others that he was not one to be easily intimidated. In addition to being aggressive, Tom was also known for his good looks, which made him a magnet for women. Wherever he went, he would use his charm to get what he wanted, never having to pay for a drink or dinner. As a popular hockey player, he was living a life of luxury, enjoying all the perks that came with his fame. Among the many women who came in and out of Tom's life, one person stood out: Kelly Stange. She was different from the others he had met. Born in West Elmira, Kelly had a bold and sassy personality. Her passion for country music took her to Nashville, where she attended college, hoping to become a teacher. After graduating, Kelly's plans took an unexpected turn, and she moved to Las Vegas, Nevada, where she started a new chapter in her life as a cocktail server and model. During the Christmas holiday, Kelly went back home to celebrate with her family and attended a hockey game in Elmira, where she met Tom Clayton. His good looks and skill on the ice caught her attention. After the game, Kelly and Tom ran into each other at a bar, and they instantly connected. Their chemistry was palpable. Although Kelly's friends and family had some reservations about Tom because of his occasional inappropriate behavior, Kelly remained steadfast in her commitment to their relationship. She would defend Tom, saying he was just joking when he made offensive comments, and her love for him blinded her to his flaws. Eventually, Kelly and Tom got married, But unfortunately, Tom suffered a career-ending injury while playing hockey just a year later. After his hockey career, Tom took a regular job at ServPro, a disaster cleanup company, which provided him with a stable income to support his family. Meanwhile, Kelly dedicated herself to caring for their two children, Charlie and Colin, and creating a loving home for them. To outsiders, the Claytons seemed like the perfect family. Tom and Kelly appeared to have everything: a successful marriage and two kids. They lived in a mountain home that Kelly loved. However, their lives took a drastic turn in September 2015. A devastating event would shatter their seemingly perfect existence. On September 29, 2015, Tom went to his friends Greg and Linda Miller's house to play poker after work, leaving Kelly alone with the children. When he returned home from the game, he made a disturbing discovery. Kelly lay dead on the kitchen floor, covered in blood. Tom was overcome with panic and immediately called 911. The dispatcher told Tom to give his wife Kelly CPR, but Tom, overcome with grief, told the dispatcher that it was too late to help her. At around midnight, a police officer arrived at Tom and Kelly's house. When the officer entered the kitchen, he was shocked by what he saw. Kelly was lying on the floor, dead, with a badly injured face, clearly the victim of a violent attack. There was blood everywhere, making for a horrifying scene. The officer's first priority was to take Tom out of the house and away from the scene. Once they were outside, the officer asked Tom what had happened. Tom said he didn't know the details, explaining that he had come home to find Kelly like that, and his daughter Charlie had told him that there was a burglar in the house. The officer cautiously examined Tom's hands to check for signs of a struggle or any evidence that might suggest Tom was involved in the attack. However, he found nothing unusual. Given the severity of the situation, the officer requested backup. A paramedic soon arrived and confirmed that Kelly Clayton had died. The brutal nature of her death led the police department to launch a thorough investigation. As officers cordoned off Tom and Kelly's home as a crime scene, Tom called Kelly's sister, Kim, to break the devastating news of Kelly's passing. Kim, in shock, rushed to the scene with their mother, Liz. When they arrived, they were met with crime scene tape and flashing patrol car lights, which only heightened their fear and anxiety. Desperate to locate Kelly, Kim and Liz rushed towards the ambulance, hoping to find paramedics trying to save her. However, the officers on the scene refused to let them get close, explaining that Kelly's body was unviewable due to her catastrophic injuries. Kelly's death and the unrecognizable state of her body devastated Kim and Liz, leaving them heartbroken. They burst into tears, their anguished screams filling the air. As the coroner's van arrived, Kim, Liz, and the officers joined hands to pray for Kelly's soul as her body was placed in a body bag and loaded into the van. As the night wore on, the crime scene investigators thoroughly searched Kelly and Tom's house and property, but found no new leads pointing to a suspect. Despite their diligent efforts, they found nothing. The investigators were unable to recover a murder weapon at the scene, but based on Kelly's injuries, they concluded that the weapon was likely small and light. The attack on Kelly occurred while she was peacefully sleeping in the master bedroom on the second floor. The attacker struck her with a blunt object. After being hit, Kelly tried to escape and sought refuge in Charlie's bedroom. A large amount of blood was found in that room, suggesting that Kelly had barricaded herself inside. However, the attack continued, as evidenced by a hole in the landing wall, which appeared to have been caused by Kelly's body being pushed down the stairs. After falling down the stairs, Kelly got up and made her way to the kitchen, where the suspect caught up to her and attacked her again in a violent encounter. The suspect brutally bludgeoned Kelly in the head and face, inflicting severe injuries that ultimately led to her death. Tom Clayton informed the first officer at the scene that his daughter Charlie had reported a robber in the house. However, the investigators who searched the property found no signs of forced entry and no evidence of theft. Furthermore, Kelly's expensive jewelry was still present and untouched, and the safe was intact, Given the brutal nature of Kelly's death, the detective initially suspected a domestic violence dispute. Despite this, Tom Clayton claimed to have an alibi, stating that he was playing poker at his friends Greg and Linda Miller's house for the entire night, which would have made it impossible for him to have committed the murder if his claim was true. When the police questioned Tom and Kelly's neighbor at the crime scene, he said he didn't think the couple had any problems and seemed happy. Later, detectives interviewed Tom about his wife's murder, and he repeated his alibi, saying he was playing poker at Greg and Linda Miller's house that night. The detectives then questioned the other players Tom mentioned, and they all confirmed that Tom was present. Although Tom had a solid alibi, the detectives found it strange that he was very calm considering the situation. They asked him repeatedly if he was involved in Kelly's murder, and Tom denied it every time. The detectives also needed to question Tom and Kelly's 7-year-old daughter, Charlie, who had witnessed the entire assault on her mother. Recognizing the importance of protecting Charlie's well-being, the detectives took a gentle approach. They started by doing fun activities with her, like playing board games, to make her feel comfortable before asking about her mother's murder. When they finally brought up the topic, they asked Charlie to describe what she had seen that night. Charlie said a robber wearing a mask, black shirt, and jeans had broken into their house. The intruder was carrying a white stick that looked like a metal pipe and used it to attack Kelly. Charlie remembered hearing Kelly shout, "Run, Charlie, run," as the attacker pushed her down the stairs. After Kelly was pushed downstairs, Charlie followed and saw the attacker beat her to death on the kitchen floor. Charlie believed her mother was dead, so she lay next to her and hugged her leg during the interview. Despite the traumatic event, 7-year-old Charlie seemed detached from the situation. Charlie told the detectives that the robber who hurt her mommy had the same eyes as her daddy. However, she was convinced her dad couldn't have done it because then who would take care of them? Based on the evidence found at the crime scene and Charlie's statements, the detectives believed that the intruder's intention was not theft, but to kill Kelly. After questioning Tom Clayton, the detectives charged him with second-degree murder in connection with his wife Kelly's death, based on his daughter's description of the intruder resembling him. Tom denied the second-degree murder charge and was released on bail, returning to the home where Kelly was killed. He cleaned up the house and continued to live there. Within a month of Kelly's murder, Tom started having affairs with multiple women, gambling in Atlantic City, and showed no signs of grief. The detectives grew suspicious of Tom's behavior, which they deemed unbecoming of a loving husband mourning the loss of his wife. Despite this, Tom maintained that he loved Kelly and would never harm her, even planning a second honeymoon with her. Tom claimed his GPS records on his work truck would prove he didn't get home until 12:35 a.m., but even after verifying this, detectives still suspected him of involvement in Kelly's murder. During their investigation, detectives questioned Greg and Linda Miller, with whom Tom played poker that night. They said Tom was quieter than usual and spent most of the night texting, but they didn't think he could hurt Kelly. The detectives also interviewed Kim, Kelly's sister, asking if she knew anyone who might want to harm Kelly. Kim mentioned Michael Beard, a close friend and co-worker of Tom's, who often helped him with tasks. Michael knew Tom's family, including Kelly and their children, and had even watched Charlie and Colin when Kelly needed to run errands. Michael had high praise for Kelly and the kids, calling them beautiful people. As well as working for Tom, Michael was also his landlord, since Tom owned the building where Michael lived with his family. Michael paid Tom a monthly rent of $11,000. But things went downhill when Michael got accused of drinking on the job. As a result, Tom fired him. This not only cost Michael his job, but also made his financial situation worse, since he was already behind on the rent he owed Tom. Tom's decision to fire Michael not only affected his job, but also put his home at risk. Tom started eviction proceedings, making Michael's financial struggles even harder. Michael found himself in a tough spot, facing both unemployment and the threat of losing his home. The detectives interviewed Michael Beard at the police station, seeking information about Kelly's murder. Michael expressed sadness over Kelly's death, but claimed he was at home all night. Linda Miller, who hosted the poker game where Tom was present on the night of Kelly's murder, remembered a peculiar incident. Tom had asked to use her cell phone, even though his own phone seemed to be functioning properly. According to Linda, Tom made the call at 10:53 p.m. Upon further inspection, Linda found that the call's details had vanished from her phone's records. It seemed that Tom had deliberately erased the number he called. The detectives obtained Greg and Linda Miller's cell phone records, which revealed the phone number Tom had dialed on the night of the murder. Tracing this number led them to Michael Beard. When the detectives discovered Tom Clayton had contacted Michael Beard on the night of his wife's murder, they brought Michael in for further questioning. Michael, however, continued to deny any involvement in Kelly's murder. The detectives then turned their attention to Michael's partner, Holly. She told them Michael had been out all night on the evening of the murder, leaving their house around 11 p.m. Moreover, Holly revealed that Tom Clayton had previously approached Michael with a proposition: burn down his and Kelly's house for $10,000 with the intention of collecting the insurance payout. Michael decided to confess to murdering Kelly after being confronted with the information. He admitted to killing Tom's wife Kelly, but claimed he did not receive the $10,000 payment they had agreed upon. In his signed confession, Michael outlined the original plan, which involved going to Tom's house and killing Kelly while the children were at their grandmother's. Tom had instructed Michael to use the gas cans in the garage to set the house on fire, allowing Tom to collect insurance payouts for the damage. However, Michael said he did not follow through with the arson and instead fled the scene. After killing Kelly, Michael took the police to the location of the murder weapon, a sledgehammer-type object that was found to have Kelly's DNA on it. He also led them to the area where he had discarded his bloody clothing. Mark Blanford, a friend of Michael Beard, came forward to the detectives and gave a statement about his encounter with Michael on the night of the murder. Michael had asked Mark to help him with a job, offering to pay him $500. Mark claimed he had no idea what the job was, assuming it was probably a drug deal. Mark said that Michael later told him he had to kill someone, and that after Michael got back in the car, he mentioned that the kids weren't supposed to be at home. Michael Beard was arrested and charged with first-degree murder in connection with Kelly Clayton's death. Detectives think that 7-year-old Charlie didn't see her father during the attack, but instead mistook the attacker for her father because of the way he was dressed. Kelly's husband, Tom, had a large life insurance policy on Kelly, which had recently been increased before her murder. Detectives believe the motive behind the murder was this policy, as Kelly would have received a significant portion of Tom's assets if they had divorced. Furthermore, detectives think Tom not only intended to kill his wife, but also wanted his children dead. This claim is supported by Michael Beard, who alleges that Tom confided in him about the planned murders. According to Michael, Tom told him that the children would be at their grandmother's house and instructed him to set the house on fire after killing Kelly. However, when Michael was instructed to set the fire, Tom knew the children would be at home, not at their grandmother's house. This information suggests Tom deliberately planned for his children's deaths, wanting to eliminate any reminders of his life with Kelly and start over as a single, child-free bachelor. Based on the evidence, it appears Tom's actions were driven by a desire to erase his past and start anew. Before his trial, Michael Beard retracted his confession, stating that he did not kill Kelly. Instead, he claimed to have entered the Clayton home and found her lying on the ground, covered in blood. As a black man in a house with a murdered white woman, Michael said he was fearful of being wrongly accused and did not want to be blamed for the crime, so he fled the scene without calling 911. Michael Beard alleged that his signed confessions were coerced, but in 2016, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In a 2020 interview, Michael altered his story again, claiming that he arrived at the Clayton home on the night Kelly was killed and saw a man running from the scene who bumped into him and nearly knocked him down. However, this new statement raised several questions, including why he failed to mention this crucial detail at the start of the investigation. Mark Blanford pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of second-degree manslaughter for his role as a lookout during Michael Beard's murder of Kelly Clayton. In exchange for his guilty plea, Mark agreed to testify against Tom Clayton. Notably, Mark had a lengthy criminal record spanning over 30 years, but had never faced such severe charges before. At his sentencing, Mark expressed regret to Kelly's family and friends, apologizing for his involvement in her murder. During Michael Beard's trial for Kelly's murder, the prosecution presented testimony from several women who claimed to have had relationships with Tom Clayton while he was still married to Kelly. One of these women testified that Tom frequently disparaged his wife, describing her as lazy. However, when Tom's defense team responded, they argued that having extramarital affairs did not necessarily make him a murderer. Ultimately, the jury convicted Tom of second-degree murder, rejecting the defense's claims. Today, Tom's children are doing well in the care of their Aunt Kim, who is Kelly's sister. They have a strong support system, which enables them to move forward with their lives despite their mother's absence. As a tribute to Kelly's memory, a park was established in the playground where she would often take her children to play. Her son has even given a special name to one of the benches there, calling it Mommy's Bench. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lindsay Burbeck. Sarah and her boyfriend Brandon arrived at her mother Lindsay's home for a scheduled tea party, but no one answered the door. This was unusual, so Sarah tried to contact her mother several times, but there was no response. She sent 2 text messages, "Where are you?" and a series of question marks, but still received no answer. After waiting outside for an hour, Sarah called her father, Tim Burbeck, to report that her mother was missing and not answering her phone. Tim picked up Sarah and Brandon and took them to his house around midnight. Sarah and Tim then returned to Lindsay's house with a spare set of keys, but found no signs of her or any indication of what might have happened. The house was in order, with no note of explanation. At 12:11 a.m. on August 13th, Tim reported Lindsay missing to the police, telling the dispatcher that his ex-wife was missing and could not be found. The disappearance of Lindsay shook the small suburban community to its core. In response, hundreds of people from the community banded together to search for her. The search party consisted of men and women, grandparents, dog walkers, teenagers with bicycles, and mothers with strollers. Despite most of them not knowing Lindsay personally, they were determined to find her. For 2 consecutive days, people gathered at Copus, fueled by hope of finding a crucial clue that could solve the mystery of her disappearance. After days of searching, posting appeals on social media and putting up posters, the community's efforts continued unabated. However, as the days turned into weeks, it became increasingly clear that the search would be a challenging one. With each passing day, the chances of finding Lindsay alive grew slimmer. The detectives classified Lindsay as high risk, given that she had never gone missing before, and her family described her disappearance as uncharacteristic of her. Nevertheless, the search party refused to give up, driven by their determination to find Lindsay. The local community quickly sprang into action, printing and distributing thousands of posters featuring Lindsay's face throughout the neighborhood. A Facebook group dedicated to the search also rapidly gained popularity, reaching 10,000 members within hours of the police appeal being posted online. As a result, posters were soon plastered on every available surface, including lampposts, storefronts, and traffic lights, calling for the public's help in finding Lindsay. The police launched a comprehensive investigation into her disappearance from her home, involving specialist officers, dog handlers, firefighters, mountain rescue teams, volunteers, and the city's search and rescue team. They scoured the area around Copus and the surrounding countryside, using drones and helicopters to search popular walking and running routes. 4 days after Lindsay vanished, the police released CCTV footage showing her last known movements. The footage, captured at 4:10 p.m. on Burnley Road, showed her walking towards Copus, wearing a distinctive purple jacket, black leggings, and dark sneakers with white soles. As the search entered its 7th day, hopes of finding Lindsay alive were dwindling. Despite the extensive efforts, the police had yet to uncover any leads on her whereabouts. However, they stressed that there was no evidence to suggest she had fallen victim to a crime, leaving open the possibility that she might still be found alive. The search for Lindsay Birbeck continued into the evening, with hundreds of local residents joining the first mass public search of Copus after a social media appeal. The breakthrough came when a local resident's dog ran into a wooded area in Arrington Cemetery. The dog's strange behavior, sniffing and digging, caught its owner's attention. As the owner approached, they were met with a horrific sight: something soft and unidentifiable underfoot, accompanied by a terrible smell and swarms of flies. Peering closer, the owner saw a foot protruding from the ground, surrounded by earth and grass, wrapped in clear plastic bags. On August 24th, 12 days after Lindsay's disappearance, her body was discovered in the cemetery, buried in a shallow grave. The gruesome discovery marked the end of the search for Lindsay and the beginning of a murder investigation. Dr. Naomi Carter, a pathologist, performed an autopsy on Lindsay's body and concluded that the cause of death was a broken neck, inflicted with extreme force that crushed the larynx. The injury was likely caused by a foot or knee strike. Additionally, there were signs of an attempt to amputate Lindsay's right leg with a saw after her death, resulting in a deep laceration down to the bone. Despite the poor condition of the body, Dr. Carter found that Lindsay's injuries were catastrophic. However, she could not rule out the possibility of sexual activity on the day of Lindsay's disappearance due to the advanced state of decomposition. Before Lindsay's body was discovered, the police and members of the public had searched the area for several days without finding anything. During the search, community volunteers and a police dog handler reported seeing a blue wheelie garbage can abandoned in nearby bushes, but its significance was not yet understood. On August 20th, at 9 p.m., volunteers searching the cemetery found a dumpster with a dark stain on the outside, which they suspected might be blood. They took photos and called the police. 2 officers arrived, inspected the dumpster, and found a brown mark that they believed was dirt. Despite this, they decided the dumpster looked new and there was no evidence linking it to Lindsay's disappearance, so they left it in place. Around the same time, other important clues were discovered in the cemetery, but initially overlooked. On August 18th, local resident Christine Alderson found a bloody cloth on the grass while walking her dogs with her daughter. Although she thought the fresh red blood might belong to a homeless man who frequented the area, she still reported it. Another dog walker, Judith Bibby, found red clothing hanging on a barbed wire fence near the Cardinal Hill Trail, which was likely Lindsay's jacket. She also heard a child's voice, but no signs of struggle, yelling, or screaming. On August 25th, investigators returned to the crime scene and discovered a yellow-handled saw and a pair of green heavy-duty gloves near Lindsay's grave. The gloves had traces of blood on them, and upon forensic testing, the results showed that the gloves contained the perpetrator's DNA on the inside surfaces, while Lindsay's DNA was found on the outside surface of the left glove. Additionally, a pair of Lindsay's Skechers sneakers, which had been cut along the sole, were found in a blue plastic bag discarded in the cemetery. Further analysis of the evidence revealed that Lindsay's body had been wrapped in plastic sheeting, and beneath the sheeting, foliage, and grass not native to the cemetery grounds were found. This led investigators to conclude that Lindsay's body had been moved from a different location before being buried in the cemetery. During the investigation, detectives remembered a blue trash can that had caught volunteers' attention. Reviewing CCTV footage, they made a surprising discovery: a young man pulling a blue wheelie garbage can in the Burley Road area multiple times. The same camera caught him visiting the cemetery 4 times. A suspect emerged, and footage of him carrying a trash can sparked a stir when broadcast on the news. The public helped identify the 16-year-old who surrendered to police the same day. Rocky Marciano Price, a local resident, was the boy in the videotape. He lived with his parents and 5 siblings in their family home of 3 decades on Winnie Hill Road in Arrington. Rocky had several mental health conditions, including autism, attention deficit disorder, and hyperactivity, which he had struggled with since childhood. His low IQ added to his learning and communication challenges. Rocky attended an alternative school in Barnoldswick a few days a week, where teachers described him as quiet and nonverbal. A 2015 psychologist's report found that Rocky had a limited understanding of his emotions and emotional well-being. He struggled to connect events and emotions. A 2016 report stated that Rocky was unresponsive to strangers and required constant supervision and care. His teachers, including Timothy Bradley, who taught at the school for 18 months, tried to engage Rocky in his education, but he preferred hands-on activities to academic subjects. Rocky rarely participated in conversations, even when discussing topics that interested him. Despite this, he was physically strong and tough for his age. He enjoyed activities like going to the gym, tending to the family's chickens, watching movies, and playing Xbox. Rocky seemed to exist in his own world, often unaware of his actions. Rocky Price randomly targeted Lindsay, killing her simply because she was lonely in the wrong place at the wrong time. On the first anniversary of the crime, August 12, 2020, Price went on trial and was unanimously found guilty by a jury after an 8-day retrial and 4 hours of deliberation. Although Price admitted to helping dispose of Lindsay's body, he claimed he had no role in her murder. He stated that a stranger approached him and asked for his help in burying the body in exchange for payment. However, evidence found at his home in Arrington contradicted his claim, including plastic bags identical to those found at Lindsay's grave. Additionally, a tracksuit and other clothing found at his home matched the outfit he wore on surveillance cameras on August 12th, 16th, and 17th, further implicating him in the crime. Defense attorney Mark Fenn Halls argued that Rocky Price, although responsible for burying the victim's body in the cemetery, was not her killer. Despite substantial evidence, Price pleaded not guilty to the crime, but admitted to moving the body. During the trial, Price, through his attorney, provided a statement explaining his movements between the crime scene in Copus and the cemetery where the body was found. However, the prosecutor maintained that Price acted alone. The motive behind the random attack on 47-year-old mother of 2, Lindsay, was never revealed, as the perpetrator did not know the victim. The judge sentenced Price to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 16 years. He will be eligible for release when the parole board deems him no longer a danger to society. The judge described the attack as swift and brutal, stating that Price clearly intended to kill a woman who was walking alone just minutes before Lindsay's incident. Meanwhile, another woman, Zoe Braithwaite, had a narrow escape from a similar attack. She encountered a suspicious teenager wearing a hood and walking alone on a parallel path. Her instincts kicked in, and she became wary of the individual, noticing that he looked out of place for a walk in the woods at that time of year. She quickened her pace and eventually ran away, likely saving her own life. The judge noted that if it hadn't been Zoe, it could have been someone else, and it was unfortunately Lindsay who fell victim. This was a calculated and intentional attack. After attempting to target one woman, he deliberately pursued another lone woman. His actions after the crime reveal his ability to think and plan. His teachers testified that he excelled in practical tasks, which he utilized to conceal the body. Rocky Price made 2 trips to Copus on the evening of August 12th. At 6:55 p.m., he was caught on CCTV cameras carrying a black backpack, possibly containing a saw, to dismember Lindsay's body. Later, at 8:28 p.m., dog walker Anthony Doe witnessed him pulling out an empty trash can from the same location where his grandfather and other family members are buried. Without showing any signs of panic or excitement, Rocky Price executed a premeditated plan to dispose of Lindsay's body. He placed her in a blue trash can, dragged her to the cemetery, and spent over an hour burying her near the railroad line. He left behind a saw, gloves, and a trash can at the scene. The senseless and brutal murder of a stranger in broad daylight is deeply disturbing to society. The random nature of the attack and his prior stalking of another woman demonstrate that he poses a significant threat to the public. Rocky Marciano Price's name and photo were published for the first time after a judge lifted restrictions following his guilty verdict. Previously, his identity was kept secret due to his young age. Although the jury knew details about Price, they were not fully disclosed until after the verdict. Price's mental illness does not excuse his actions, as he knew killing was wrong. Lindsay's funeral was held at St. Margaret's Church in Hapton on September 20th, where over 200 mourners gathered to pay their respects. As police directed traffic on Manchester Road, Lindsay's coffin, adorned with flowers, was carried into the church. The outpouring of sympathy was evident in the dozens of bouquets from friends, family, and strangers alike left at the scene in her memory. According to her daughter Sarah, Lindsay was a woman full of optimism and positivity, always looking forward to the future. In fact, she had plans to visit Glasgow with her friend Sharon and was hoping to find love on the Match.com dating site. Tragically, her bright future was cut short on a sunny summer day. Rocky Price's fascination with death and mutilation may be a symptom of a deeper issue, such as autism. This neurodevelopmental disorder can cause difficulties with social interaction, motor skills, and repetitive behaviors, leading to withdrawal and isolation. While the exact cause is unclear, the consequences of Rocky's actions fit the severity of his crime, including burying Lindsay's mutilated body. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Nathan and Crystal Maddox. Nathan and Crystal Maddox grew up on neighboring streets, fell in love, and later got married when Crystal became pregnant. Despite initial disapproval from Crystal's parents, they eventually accepted the relationship and even let the young couple get married. After their wedding, Nathan and Crystal started a family, having a daughter named Madison. However, their life was far from perfect. Nathan had to work hard to support his family, often traveling to Montana for work. Despite the distance, he remained devoted to his family, regularly sending money and visiting whenever possible. But one day, Nathan returned home from Montana to find his house empty and a note from Crystal saying she was leaving him. She claimed she didn't know where he was or when he would return, which was a lie, as Nathan had been regularly updating her on his whereabouts. The worst part was that she took their daughter Madison with her and even went to the police station, falsely accusing Nathan of neglecting his child in order to gain full custody. Nathan tried to visit his daughter Madison, but her mother's family, the Westfalls, kept pushing him away, relieved to be rid of him. Years passed, and Nathan returned to his hometown to be close to Madison. He didn't give up trying to see her, but he knew he needed a lawyer to get official custody and legal visitation rights. During this time, Nathan met Crystal, an old friend from childhood. They had gone to school together, but their paths diverged when Crystal moved to the city to attend university. However, she got married and started a family instead of pursuing a career. After her divorce, Crystal returned to her hometown with her 4 children. Nathan was immediately drawn to Crystal's energy and optimism. They got married in 2013, and Nathan worked at a warehouse while Crystal started a clothing business and opened a children's boutique. The family was doing well, and they could finally afford a good lawyer to help Nathan get custody of Madison. Madison was thrilled with her father's new family, including Crystal and her siblings. This made Kristen's parents, Lita and Paula Westfall, very resentful and afraid of losing their granddaughter. In 2012, Kristen had applied for full custody of Madison, and the battle dragged on for 2 years. However, Crystal's presence in Nathan's life changed everything. With a stable family and a good job, Nathan was granted visitation rights, and he was ecstatic. In October 2013, the judge allowed supervised visits with Madison. On January 18, 2014, Nathan and Crystal attended a Sunday service at Mount Carmel Church, planning to take Madison for a walk afterwards. But as they left the church, 3 loud shots were heard. Nathan and Crystal were shot and killed, shocking the small town. The police investigation revealed that Nathan and Crystal were shot in the head with a .30 caliber rifle, and Nathan was also shot in the thigh with a 20-gauge shotgun, indicating that there were 2 shooters. The investigation continued, with interviews of witnesses, acquaintances, and relatives, including Kristen's family. The Westfalls' behavior shocked investigators. Instead of grieving Nathan's death, they seemed to be hiding their joy. Paul Westfall even faked a seizure, claiming he was too shocked to believe the news. It was clear they were involved in the murder, but the motive remained unknown. Kristen was the first to be interviewed, and her demeanor was eerily calm, and that despite her long history with Nathan and their shared child. She provided strange details about him, only highlighting the negative aspects of their relationship. Kristen claimed she knew who killed him, mentioning that Nathan had been involved with dangerous motorcycle gangs in Montana. One gang member had even threatened to kill him at his mother's house. Although this story checked out, it turned out to be an empty threat due to a broken motorcycle. As an alibi, Kristen said she was at the grocery store with her father, Paul, on the day of the crime. Surveillance footage confirmed their presence at 10:57 a.m. Paul told the same story, but as a hunter with access to firearms, his hands were tested for gunpowder residue, which came back negative. However, his reaction to Nathan's death seemed suspicious, leaving a sliver of doubt about his sincerity. Further investigation revealed that Nathan was involved in a bitter custody battle with Kristen over their daughter. He was close to gaining custody, which the Westfall family strongly opposed. This desperate battle might have been a motive for the murder, but the police had no concrete evidence to arrest anyone. The family consisted of 4 people, and 2 of them were the shooters. Investigators were yet to figure out who pulled the trigger or if they had hired a killer. Focusing on the key player in the controversy, Madison Maddox, the police decided to act. They removed her from the home, citing safety concerns, and searched the house. The search yielded disturbing results. A gun was easily accessible, and illegal drugs were scattered around the house. In 2013, Kristen was arrested and charged with possessing a controlled substance. Despite this, she continued to live with her parents and daughter, defying court orders. In 2014, Child Protective Services discovered a used syringe with illegal substances and a gun on Kristen's nightstand, leading to Madison being taken into temporary custody. The authorities wanted to place Madison in foster care due to the presence of illegal substances and a gun in the Westfall home. However, there was no direct evidence linking the Westfalls to the Maddox murder, and cross-examinations did not produce the desired results. To pressure the Westfalls, the police focused on 18-year-old Cameron, the most vulnerable family member. They threatened him with life imprisonment for his family and the death penalty for the direct killers if he didn't cooperate. Fearing for his family, Cameron agreed to work with the investigation and revealed the details of the crime. The murder of the young couple, Maddox, was carefully planned by the Westfall family to eliminate Nathan from his role as father. This was due to a bitter custody dispute between Nathan and his ex-wife, Kristen, who had the support of her family. The Westfalls were determined to keep Madison from her father, and when the judge allowed Nathan multiple visitations, it became clear he could win the trial. Kristen and her family plotted a scheme to remove Nathan from Madison's life. They tried to find someone to kill him, but when that failed, Kristen and her father decided to do it themselves. On January 18th, the family attended church, and Kristen and Paul created an alibi by posing as customers at a distant store to get on CCTV cameras. Meanwhile, Lyda Westfall, Kristen's mother, attended the church service with Madison and informed Paul of Nathan and Crystal's departure. She called 911 immediately after the murder. Cameron played a role in concealing the evidence, discarding the gun used in the murder near a remote church and at a lake. He later cooperated with authorities, revealing that Kristen came up with the idea and the family went along with it. The police arrested Kristen, her brother Cameron, and her parents, Paul and Lyda Westfall, and charged them with organized crime. Kristen and Paul were the ones who pulled the trigger, while Cameron and Lyda acted as willing accomplices. Although Lyda was at the church during the incident, phone records showed she informed her daughter and husband of the couple's whereabouts. The trial was lengthy, with each member of the Westfall family tried separately. Paul Westfall was initially found mentally unfit, but was later deemed competent and faced the death penalty along with Lyda. To avoid the death penalty, they agreed to a plea bargain with the DA's office. Paul Westfall took a plea bargain with the prosecution, pleading guilty to the charges and receiving a life sentence without parole. Lyda Westfall, his wife, also took a plea bargain, pleading guilty to organized criminal activity. She will be eligible for parole in 2046 and is currently incarcerated at Mountain View Prison in Gatesville, Texas. Kristen Westfall, the daughter of Paul and Lyda, pleaded not guilty to all charges against her, claiming her family was crazy and she was the only sane one. However, when her family members testified against her in court, she was unable to respond. The motive behind the murder of Nathan and Crystal Maddox was revealed to be custody of their 5-year-old daughter, Madison. Kristen did not want Nathan to have unrestricted access to Madison and wanted to control her father's communication with the child. The trial took over a week, and with overwhelming evidence against her, the jury found her guilty of capital murder in just 8 hours. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Cameron Westfall, the youngest member of the family, was charged with 2 counts of tampering with evidence. He pleaded guilty and received a deferred sentence, contingent upon him testifying against his family. He faced up to 10 years in prison on each charge. Although he claimed to have had no involvement in the actual shooting, phone records showed that his mother had texted her husband and daughter during the crime. Cameron is currently incarcerated at the Huntsville Correctional Facility in Texas and is expected to be released in 2025. The case was highly publicized and shook the community of Colmsnale, Texas, to its core. The Westfall family's brutal crime was committed outside Mount Carmel Baptist Church, where Nathan and Crystal Maddox were shot and killed in 2014. In 2016, a judge sentenced Cameron to 10 years in prison, and his mother received a life sentence the following year. Lloyd Paul was also sentenced to life in prison after pleading guilty to first-degree murder, which meant he could not appeal his sentence. Kristen Westfall, the mastermind behind the crime, received a life sentence without parole. The legal battle for custody of Madison Maddox, Kristen's daughter, continued even after the Westfall family was sentenced. Nathan Maddox's father, Jim, filed a petition to become the primary guardian of his granddaughter. It's worth noting that many people die in custody battles every year, and instead of making children happier, these battles often leave them with psychological problems. The Westfall family, who were devout churchgoers, were willing to kill to achieve their goals, hiding behind their concern for Madison. Nathan, Madison's father, was not a bad person and loved his daughter. However, his ex-wife Kristen was filled with hatred towards him. particularly because he had started a new family and found happiness with his new partner, Crystal. Kristen was able to manipulate her family against Nathan, leading to the tragic events that unfolded. The custody dispute started before Nathan and Crystal's relationship, and in the end, there is only one loser, Madison. Hopefully, when she grows up, she will not remember the selfishness of the adults who used her for their own gain, claiming to act out of love. If they truly loved her, they would have worked to build a normal relationship for her sake, rather than pursuing their own interests. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Christy Shawn. Christy Maria Shawn Cody was born on September 3, 1976, in Madrid, Spain, to American military parents. Due to her father's duties as a U.S. Air Force soldier, the family frequently relocated, following him to various European countries before eventually returning to the United States. Shawn began her education in New Orleans, Louisiana, but the family soon moved to Texas, then Illinois, and later spent several years in Latin American countries. Although this nomadic lifestyle presented challenges, it also allowed her to develop valuable skills, such as speaking multiple languages and experiencing different cultures. However, during her teenage years, Shawn struggled to adjust to new environments, make friends, and settle into new social circles. Just as she would start to feel comfortable, the family would move again, requiring her to adapt to new schools and peer groups. Despite these challenges, Shawn developed strong communication skills, which enabled her to quickly find common ground with diverse people. She was known for being a sweet, sociable, and charming young woman. In addition to her social skills, Shawn was also actively involved in sports from an early age, participating in gymnastics, swimming, and kickboxing classes for a time. When Christy finished school, her family moved to Beloit, Mississippi, where her father had retired from the military. It was here that she formed lasting friendships and discovered a passion for cooking. She experimented with various recipes, honing her culinary skills and earning praise for her creations. This led her to pursue formal culinary training, completing courses to further develop her talent. While her parents expected her to become a professional chef, Christy also discovered an aptitude for acting. She enrolled in an acting academy in Los Angeles, seizing every opportunity that came her way. She appeared in commercials, performed on stage, and worked as an extra or stunt performer in several high-profile productions. After graduating from the academy in 2000, Christy had yet to land a significant role. Despite her talents and striking appearance, she shifted her focus to her culinary skills and sports, turning these passions into a successful business. Christy is a strong advocate for a healthy lifestyle, offering advice on proper nutrition and developing her own exercise routines to maintain physical fitness. About a year after her TV debut, she founded a successful catering company that provides banquet services and retails prepared culinary products. Her business stands out for its focus on healthy eating and features her own original recipes. Christy's next goal is to start her own farm, which will grow healthy and environmentally friendly produce. This will enable her to expand her catering business while promoting sustainable practices. In addition, she conducts online courses on proper nutrition and develops other projects, further establishing herself as a prominent figure in the culinary industry. In 2012, Christy had a fateful encounter on TV when she met Joseph Timothy Cody, a casting director known as JT, at a studio in Los Angeles. At the time, Christy was auditioning for a culinary show, and JT was responsible for selecting participants and actors for various high-rated projects. There was an instant connection between them. Despite being nearly 7 years older than Christy and in the process of getting a divorce, JT was captivated by her beauty and charisma. He began to pursue her, and Christy was receptive to his advances. Soon, they started a romantic relationship. Joseph and his partner Christy shared a dream of building a life together in North Carolina. They left Los Angeles, selling their businesses and home, and invested in a large plot of land in Leicester. They bought a spacious house and nearly 1-acre property where Christy focused on her blog about healthy nutrition and lifestyle, and Joseph continued to work with TV channels remotely. Their relationship was filled with harmony, and in August 2014, they had a grand wedding attended by hundreds of guests. 3 months later, they were overjoyed to discover they were expecting their first child. They learned they were having a daughter during a routine ultrasound examination and chose to name her Skylar. Everything seemed perfect, but their happiness was short-lived. Christy's mother, who lived out of state, regularly called her to update on her life. However, on March 13, 2015, Christy's mother couldn't reach her, but didn't think much of it. The next day, neither Christy nor Joseph answered their phones. By March 15th, both phones were turned off, which alarmed Christy's mother. She asked a close friend, Cecily, who lived nearby, to check on the couple. Cecily found the cars parked outside, but the front door was locked, and no one responded to her knocks and shouts. She saw the couple's dogs locked in a room through a window and noticed the back door lock had been broken. She immediately called Christy's mother, who then contacted the police. The responding officers found signs of a break-in at the back door and disarray inside the house. Valuables were stolen, including a jewelry box and a breached safe in the bedroom. However, there was no evidence of a struggle, bloodshed, or forced detention. The perpetrator seemed to have taken great care to leave no fingerprints or DNA traces. The relatives held out hope that Joseph and Christy might still be alive, but experienced officers were not optimistic. The investigation struggled to make progress, with no significant clues or evidence found. The missing couple appeared to have no enemies, making it difficult to piece together what had happened. The police decided to question the neighbors to see if they had noticed anything unusual recently. A crucial detail emerged during the investigation into the disappearance of Christy and Joseph Cody. A neighbor reported seeing another local resident, later identified as 36-year-old Robert Jason Owens, throwing a large bundle into a trash bin near the Cody's home on the morning of March 15th. Although the trash had already been taken to the dump, the police wanted to speak with Owens, who was a handyman and friend of the couple. Upon questioning, Owens initially denied any involvement in the couple's disappearance and claimed ignorance about the bundle. However, the situation changed dramatically when the bundle was found at the landfill, containing items from the missing couple's home, including Owens' fingerprints and DNA traces on partially burnt clothing stained with blood. A search of Owens' home revealed charred human skeletal remains in his wood stove, incriminating him in the brutal elimination of his neighbor and his pregnant wife. Despite his initial denials, Owens eventually confessed to the crime after several hours of questioning. According to Owens, the incident occurred on the evening of March 12th, when he visited the Cody's home after getting stuck in the mud. He claimed that while trying to get his car out, he accidentally struck and ran over the couple while sitting in the driver's seat. Panicked, he decided not to call the police and instead covered up the incident. Owens claimed that he broke into the Cody's house, took blankets to move the bodies, and then dismembered them in his own bathroom. He proceeded to burn the body parts in his stove, but packed the blood-soaked clothing, blankets, and footwear into a trash bag and disposed of them in a dumpster. The police were shocked by Owens' cruel actions and eerie calmness when recounting the events. Forensic analysis confirmed that the bone fragments found in Owens' stove belonged to the missing couple. Robert, a man with no family and little contact with relatives, moved to Leicester in 2000 after buying land and building a house. However, his name became linked to a 15-year-old unsolved crime in Asheville, where he previously lived. The crime involved his close friend Zeb Wayne Quinn, who vanished mysteriously at the age of 18. Zeb and Robert had been friends since school and lived nearby. Zeb was undergoing military training and worked part-time at Walmart. On January 2, 2000, Zeb finished his shift and met with Robert, planning to drive to Leicester to buy a new car. However, he never returned home. A few days later, Zeb's car was found parked in another part of town with its headlights on and a heart drawn on the window with red lipstick. The car had damage and scratches with paint particles from another vehicle. Robert, who was the last person to see Zeb, told an implausible story. According to Robert, Zeb asked him to stop the car to make a phone call, saying he received an urgent message on his pager. Zeb drove off to a gas station, returned 10 minutes later looking frantic, and changed their plans. He then drove off in an unknown direction, hitting Robert's car in the process. However, Robert's car also had damage with paint particles from Zeb's car, raising suspicions about his involvement in Zeb's disappearance. Zeb Quinn had been romantically involved with Misty Taylor, who previously dated Wesley Smith. Smith had threatened Zeb, warning him to stay away from Misty or face harm. Although Zeb, Smith, and Owens were questioned, they were released due to lack of evidence. Misty and Smith had alibis, but Robert did not. A large sum of money Zeb had been carrying to buy a car vanished from his car and pager. The investigation suggested that Zeb never received a mysterious message, if any. A strange incident occurred the day after Zeb's disappearance. Someone claiming to be Zeb called Walmart, saying he would be absent from work for a few days due to illness. However, the colleague who answered the call thought the voice sounded unfamiliar, not like Zeb's. The call was traced back to a Volvo plant where Robert worked. When questioned, Owens unexpectedly claimed he made the call at his friend's request the night before Zeb disappeared. Despite further investigation, no new evidence or witnesses were found, and the case remains unsolved, with Zeb Quinn still listed as missing. 15 years after the events, Owens was questioned again, suspected of being involved in his friend Zeb Quinn's disappearance. The case was reopened in June 2015, and the investigation resumed. Although Owens stuck to his original story, the police searched his property thoroughly and found something unusual. In a concrete slab on Owens' property, they discovered a hidden cavity containing small, heavily charred human bone fragments. Unfortunately, the remains were too damaged for DNA analysis, so it was impossible to confirm whether they belonged to Quinn. A neighbor's statement added another surprising detail. An elderly man recalled an incident from January 2000 when Owens had just bought the land and was building his house. One evening, Owens started a fire that emitted a sickly, sweet, nauseating smell, which the neighbor found unbearable due to the wind blowing the stench in his direction. After covering the fire pit with concrete, which raised suspicions, Robert Owens claimed he intended to build a small fountain, but never did. 15 years later, the police arrived at the property, and Owens confessed to a crime, offering a new explanation. He stated that his uncle, Walter Owens, had murdered Misty's boyfriend, Zeb, at the request of Wesley Smith, who was still in love with Misty. Robert claimed he was unaware of the plan at the time and was only asked by his uncle to lure Zeb to a secluded area. According to Robert, his uncle had ordered them to stop their cars in a wooded area and then had Zeb exit his vehicle. Walter then shot Zeb silently and instructed Robert to help dismember and package the body. The body was burned on Robert's property that night and encased in concrete. However, it was not possible to question Walter Owens, as he had died several years prior to Robert's confession. The police found no evidence at the alleged crime scene, and Robert's story seemed unconvincing. He was charged with multiple crimes, including first-degree murder, murder of an unborn child, dismemberment, concealment of evidence, burglary, and robbery, which could have led to the death penalty. The defendant's lawyer argued that their client's depression and mental disorders, which required powerful medication, contributed to their actions. This defense strategy could have led to the defendant being found not guilty by reason of insanity and sent to a psychiatric hospital instead of prison. However, the prosecution and the victim's relatives were not satisfied with this possibility. Meanwhile, the investigation into Quinn's case was ongoing, which could have also resulted in the defendant avoiding punishment. In 2017, the defendant accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to the murders of the Codes in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. As a result, they were convicted of second-degree manslaughter, as well as several other crimes including dismemberment, incineration of bodies, burglary, and robbery. Owens was sentenced to 59 years in prison. In 2022, he reached another plea deal with authorities, this time related to Quinn's case. Although he only admitted to being an accomplice to murder and helping to conceal evidence, he received an additional 12-year sentence, effectively extending his life sentence. After sentencing, Owens spoke to the court, asking the families of his victims for forgiveness. Despite this, he maintained his innocence, blaming an accident and his mental disorder, which he claimed was exacerbated by strong medication. However, the families of Christay and Joseph Coed, as well as Quinn's family, remained unconvinced. They rejected the notion of unintentional murder, believing that Owens acted deliberately and with selfish motives in both cases. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Crystal Perry. Crystal Perry was born on August 23, 1963, in the small American town of Rumford, Maine. She was the youngest of 10 children, and their parents had to provide for all of them, which was understandably a challenge. Crystal and her siblings grew up quite independently with strict parents, unable to watch over all the kids. Their older sister, who was just 12 when Crystal was born, took care of them like a mother, always looking out for her younger brothers and sisters. Growing up in a tense environment, they all wanted to start their own separate lives as soon as possible. Eventually, they scattered to different cities and states. Crystal was no exception. She wanted to start a family of her own and met a guy named Tom in high school. They soon got married and moved to California, but eventually, Crystal realized that big city life just wasn't for her. After a year and a half, they decided to return to Maine, settling in a small town called Bridgeton, about an hour away from her hometown. Crystal got a job at a local shoe shop, while Tom took on various odd jobs. Soon, Crystal discovered she was pregnant, and they welcomed their daughter Sarah. Despite the fact that Tom had initially wanted to be a father, their relationship with Crystal became complicated after their daughter's birth. He spent more and more time at a local bar, squandering almost all their money on alcohol. Once, he even took the money Crystal had set aside for groceries, as they didn't earn much. Tom's drinking habit sometimes left them with no money even for food. At some point, Crystal decided to file for divorce. Tom continued to see his daughter from time to time, but wasn't actively involved in her life. The situation escalated when Tom got a new girlfriend, who started to harass Crystal. She called and threatened Crystal, show up at her place, and cause scenes, all because she simply didn't like that Crystal and Tom had once been married. Afraid to let Sarah visit her father, Crystal moved in with her mother. Over the years, she worked hard to save enough money to buy a house of her own. A few years later, she finally had the opportunity and purchased a small house on the outskirts of Bridgeton. The house was located just a few dozen yards from a picturesque lake surrounded by a forest. Crystal and Sarah were thrilled to have their own home, just for the two of them. On May 10, 1994, when Crystal was 30 and Sarah was 12, they watched a solar eclipse together. The next day, as usual, Crystal went to work and Sarah to school. In the evening, they had dinner together, and Crystal tucked her daughter into bed. A few hours later, Sarah suddenly woke up to a loud scream. At first, she thought her mom was arguing with someone on the phone, but she quickly realized it was much more serious. Crystal was screaming at the top of her lungs, and Sarah immediately thought someone was attacking her mom. The door to her bedroom was slightly ajar, and through her fear, she came closer to it. Sarah realized that the screams were coming from the kitchen, but she couldn't see what was happening from where she stood. Sarah was gripped by fear and afraid to move or make any sound. After a few seconds, she heard footsteps and thought that whoever had attacked her mom was coming for her. She hid behind the bed, waiting for her door to swing open at any moment. Instead, she heard the kitchen drawer open, followed by a sound like someone was rummaging through the silverware. Crystal continued to scream and beg for mercy, and in the next few seconds, Sarah heard sounds as if someone had started stabbing her mom with a knife. With each new stab wound, her cries became increasingly muffled until they stopped completely. Despite being only 12, Sarah understood clearly that some unknown criminal was killing her mom. She wanted to rush to her mother's aid, but was paralyzed with fear. Sarah also realized that she had no chance against the knife-wielding person, and they would likely just kill her too. After her mother's screams stopped, Sarah couldn't move for several minutes. She waited for the criminal to come to her room, but the house was eerily silent. She finally left her room and went to the kitchen, where she encountered a disturbing scene. The lights were off, and the room was only illuminated by the moonlight through the window. As Sarah approached the kitchen, she glanced at the wall clock and saw that it was exactly 1 a.m. On the kitchen floor, she found her mother lying in a pool of blood that covered the entire floor. Despite being in a state of shock, Sarah recognized the urgency of getting help as soon as possible. Next to her mother's hand, she saw the telephone receiver. She picked it up and dialed 911, but there was complete silence on the line. Sarah then rushed to Crystal's room, where the second phone was, and tried to call the police again, but this number also did not work. She dialed the numbers several times, then realized she had only one option left: seeking assistance from the neighbors. Sarah rushed out into the street in just her pajamas, barefoot. It was May, and the temperature was quite low. It had also been raining that night. But she didn't think about anything except helping her mother. The closest house was around half a mile down the road towards the city center. She reached it and began knocking on the door, but no one answered. Sarah then ran to other houses, but again, no one opened the door. She kept running towards the city center, knocking on several more doors, but still no one responded. Eventually, she reached an Italian restaurant where the owners lived in the attached building. This time, they finally opened the door. Sarah told them that someone had attacked her mother, and the shocked residents led her inside. Sarah called 911 herself and reported what had happened. The officers immediately headed to their house. The first thing they noticed was the amount of blood. It was literally everywhere, on the floor, walls, and practically on every kitchen item. Crystal was dead, and the medical experts could tell at a glance that she had almost no chance of survival, even if she had received help immediately after the attack. Given the severe blood loss, it would have been impossible to save her. On the front door glass, the police found a palm print, but quickly realized it likely belonged to Sarah. No other fingerprints were found at the crime scene, but there were numerous shoe prints on the kitchen floor, stained with blood. Investigators took photos to try to determine the size and model of the shoes, thinking they had most likely belonged to the killer. The prints also led toward Sarah's bedroom, but for some reason, the perpetrator turned back and didn't enter the room. Detectives also noticed a strange detail. Apparently, the killer tried to wipe away some of the blood from the floor. Considering that almost the entire kitchen was covered in it, along with Crystal herself, this seemed odd. It was obvious he couldn't have wiped away all the blood. Then detectives noticed that some blood drops on the floor were in different shapes. Most of them looked as if they had landed at an angle. According to investigators, they had likely flown off the knife the perpetrator used to attack the victim, but there were also other drops that had fallen on the floor at a right angle and, judging by the splatters, from a greater height. Detectives speculated that apparently the perpetrator had injured themselves during the murder, and this blood belonged to them. Another confirmation of this theory was the fact that these drops led to a roll of paper towels, and there were none left on the way out of the house. Most likely, the killer used these towels to stop the bleeding and immediately left the crime scene. Medical experts found over 50 stab wounds on Crystal's body. The murder weapon was not found in the house, leading detectives to believe that the perpetrator took it with them. Experts only confirmed that it must have been a kitchen knife. The killer struck with such force that a piece broke off and lodged into the victim's body. Crystal had also been sexually assaulted, and experts were able to extract a sample of the perpetrator's semen along with the blood drops. It was sent to the lab. However, there was a problem. Due to funding shortages, the local laboratory was quite overloaded, so results would take at least 6 months. As a result, detectives had to begin the investigation without any evidence. First, they ruled out robbery, since nothing was missing from the house. There were no signs of forced entry either, leading police to speculate that the victim had opened the door to the perpetrator herself. She was in her pajamas, suggesting she was unlikely expecting guests. Investigators theorized that she either knew the killer or someone unfamiliar knocked on the door and convinced her to let them in under some pretext. The detective decided to start with the only witness, Sarah. They went to the hospital where she was being held for health checks and began questioning her. The police asked why she ran to the neighbors instead of calling 911 from home. Sarah replied that both their phones weren't working. But this answer seemed strange to the investigators when they arrived at the crime scene and were able to make calls without any problems. The detectives assumed that in such a stressful situation, Sarah could have simply gotten confused. The receiver of the first phone was off the hook, and to make a call, it needed to be placed back. As for the second phone, they didn't rule out that Sarah might have dialed the wrong number in haste, or the phone line might have temporarily gone out due to the rain. Then the police started asking her if she saw the killer. Sarah responded that she had not left her bedroom until it was all over, but the police treated her story with a bit of skepticism. They asked how she could know that her mother was attacked with a knife. Sarah replied that it was obvious, but the detectives continued to press her. They felt that she might be withholding some information and that she had actually seen the perpetrator. In the first 3 days after the murder, the police interrogated Sarah 18 times, hoping that her story would change. But she continued to insist that everything had happened as she told them. While pursuing other leads, detectives stumbled upon their first breakthrough. They found a pair of boots at a local shoe store, whose sole patterns matched the bloody footprints on the floor. They also discovered that Crystal had been harassed by Teresa, the girlfriend of her ex-husband. Despite the killer being obviously a man, the police decided to investigate her, considering that Teresa had repeatedly threatened the victim with murder. They could have found an accomplice and convinced him to commit the crime. However, detectives found no evidence to support this theory. Investigators then learned that at the time of her death, Crystal was seeing a man named Dennis. They had met 2 years prior when he started working in the shoe shop, and they began dating shortly after. Dennis eventually proposed to her, and although Crystal agreed, they never got married. Detectives found out that their relationship was quite tense. Crystal and Dennis argued a lot, and sometimes he displayed aggressive behavior, such as breaking things or hitting the wall. However, the police couldn't find any evidence that he had ever raised a hand on Crystal. The next day after the murder, they went to his house. When he opened the door, the investigators asked if he had left his house that night or seen Crystal. Dennis immediately asked if she was dead, and in the next second, he collapsed on the floor. After he regained consciousness, he began answering the detectives' questions. Dennis confirmed that he had planned to visit Crystal that evening, but got delayed after work, helping a friend fix a car. Upon returning home, he called Crystal, but she said it was too late, leading to an argument, and Dennis ended up staying home. While the police couldn't be 100% sure he was telling the truth, they were able to verify that he did help his friend that evening. Dennis also agreed to a polygraph test, and the operator didn't detect any signals of lying, except for one when he asked if he felt responsible for Crystal's death. Dennis answered no. Detectives also noticed that he had the same shoe size as the killer, but they found no matching footwear in Dennis's house. He agreed to provide a DNA sample, but made a strange request. He asked the detectives to come to his workplace through the back door to avoid disturbing others if they decided to arrest him. He explained that his boss had always treated him well, and he didn't want to disrupt the workflow. Considering that he continued to insist on his innocence, this request seemed suspicious. The police found out that Crystal's best friend, who lived in another town, had told them that just a few weeks before, Crystal had called her and said that she was scared of Dennis. Their arguments were becoming increasingly tense, and Dennis was growing more aggressive with each altercation. Crystal even thought about breaking up with him, but feared his reaction. During the conversation, she didn't provide any useful information, but as soon as the police left her workplace, Dennis came in and started asking what she had told the detectives. Despite their efforts, there was no evidence against the man, and the DNA test results would take months, so the police kept looking for other clues. They soon received a strange tip. A local man named Donnie got drunk at a party and started bragging about having killed Crystal. They took him in for questioning, but he claimed to have no memory of the party and denied any involvement in the murder. The investigators later discovered that Donnie was an alcoholic and a known liar. Another witness reported seeing a black pickup truck with New Hampshire plates near Crystal's house, but this lead didn't lead anywhere either. One woman told the police that on the night of the murder, she was driving past Sarah's house when she heard sirens and thought they were for her boyfriend, who lived down the road. At the same time, she saw a car with high beams on, following her at high speed. Thinking the driver was chasing her, she turned onto another road, but the car passed her by. However, the police couldn't confirm if this car was somehow related to the murder. Since then, the police struggled to find any solid leads. Crystal's relatives pulled together $10,000 as a reward for any information on the case, and they also distributed flyers around town, hoping to attract new witnesses. It's worth mentioning that Teresa, the girlfriend of Crystal's ex-husband, was seen tearing down these flyers multiple times. As for the ex-husband himself, he was thoroughly investigated, but detectives eventually doubted his involvement. Over the years, his alcohol problems became even worse, and now Tom drank heavily every day. In his condition, it seemed unlikely he could have committed such a crime, and he had no clear motive. The police also looked into 2 other men Crystal dated after divorcing her husband, but they found no evidence linking them to the case. All of them, including Tom, provided DNA samples, leaving detectives waiting for the lab results. 9 months after the murder, investigators finally received the results, which showed that the blood and semen samples didn't match any of the suspects, including Dennis. This left detectives with no other leads. They requested Dennis's sample again for additional testing, but the results remained the same. Stuck in a dead end, investigators decided to revisit their only witness, Sarah. They still assumed that either she was lying to them or her mind had blocked out the horrific memories of her mother's murder, and she actually saw the killer at that time. Sarah was living with her aunt in Texas, so the police headed to the other end of the country to question her. They polygraphed her, but the operator didn't detect any false answers. Despite this, investigators continued talking to her day after day, asking the same questions, but each time, she replied that she didn't see the killer. After that, the case remained unsolved for several years. The police kept interviewing people, checking various suspects, but it yielded no results. In the late 90s, when the FBI DNA database became available, investigators uploaded the sample of Crystal's killer, but no matches were found. In 1999, a new detective was assigned to the case. He decided not only to review all existing evidence, but also to collect DNA samples from as many men as possible living in the town and nearby areas. By then, the laboratory could conduct tests much faster, and the police obtained hundreds of samples, but none of them matched. The new detective also reached out to Sarah and persuaded her to work with a psychologist to try to recover suppressed memories. She agreed, but the psychologist concluded that Sarah truly didn't remember anything and was telling the truth about not seeing the perpetrator. Since then, the case remained unsolved for many years. Detectives kept working on it, but couldn't find any new leads. This continued until 2006 when something unexpected happened. Detectives received a message. A DNA sample was entered into the FBI database, and it matched with the blood and semen left by Crystal's killer. The owner of the DNA turned out to be a man named Michael Hutchinson, who had never been a suspect in the case. Detectives found out that in 2003, he was arrested for assault and threats with a weapon, resulting in a 6-month prison sentence and 3 years of probation. At the time, his DNA sample was taken, but for some reason, it wasn't uploaded to the FBI database and remained stored in the lab. 3 years later, Michael was arrested for drunk driving with his children in the car. He was released on bail, but he didn't show up for his court hearing, so he was sent to prison. Michael was also arrested right at his own wedding and placed in a cell. His DNA sample was taken again, and this time, it was immediately uploaded to the database. Soon after, investigators in Crystal's case received a match. The detective called Sarah and informed her about this, but asked her to keep the information secret until the official charges were filed. He also asked if she knew this person, and Sarah said no. Considering that Michael was already behind bars, the detective began slowly building the case to ensure that the suspect had no chance of escaping punishment. He found out that at the time of the murder, Michael lived in Bridgeton, just 2 miles from Crystal's house. Michael, who was 19 at the time, lived near the Italian restaurant where Sarah called the police. He drove to his mother's house almost every day, which was just a little further away than Crystal's house, so Michael regularly passed by it. For the detective, it meant that he could have seen Crystal multiple times. Eventually, he went to see Michael in prison, but the man claimed to have no connection to the murder and said he never knew the victim. Considering that his DNA was found on her body and his blood was found at the crime scene, the detective didn't rush to believe him. While in prison, the detective noticed something interesting. Michael had a large scar on his palm, and as we recall, Crystal's killer likely cut his hand during the murder. Although in court this could not be considered strong evidence, the presence of DNA was more than sufficient, so Michael was finally charged with murder. According to the prosecution, the man, a known user of illegal substances, had repeatedly seen Crystal as he passed by her house on that fateful night. He decided to assault her, and considering that he refused to confess, it was difficult to speculate on how exactly everything happened. But with the available evidence, the outcome was clear. Michael assaulted and killed her. During the trial, an explanation was also found for the fact that the killer managed to not leave a single fingerprint at the crime scene. The answer was quite unexpected. Michael worked as a bricklayer, and over time, people who have been engaged in this job begin to wear away the patterns on their palms, making it physically impossible for them to leave fingerprints on various surfaces. In his defense, Michael told his version of events. He said he met Crystal at a bar and they went back to her place, where they had consensual intercourse. At some point, an unknown man in a black motorcycle jacket burst into the house, knocked Michael out, and killed Crystal. When he regained consciousness, Michael tried to fight off the attacker, but the assailant injured him in the hand and fled. Michael himself also decided to leave the crime scene without any reasonable explanation. His story obviously seemed highly doubtful. The only shoe prints on the floor also belonged to him. If his story was true, the intruder would have had to take off his shoes before breaking into the house, and it still wouldn't have explained the absence of any other marks on the floor. Furthermore, there wasn't a single witness who saw Crystal at that bar. The trial ended on April 9, 2007, and Michael was unanimously found guilty. He received a life sentence without the possibility of parole and remains in prison to this day. As for Sarah, her mother's murder undoubtedly had a critical impact on her. However, over the years, she found the strength to move forward. She attended college, became a writer, and published a book about her mother's murder, compiling all the available information. Moreover, When she was working on the book, Sarah managed to uncover new facts overlooked by the police. She discovered that during those years, Michael often borrowed his father's car, a black Ford pickup truck with New Hampshire license plates. As we recall, one witness reported seeing such a vehicle near Crystal's house. She also remembered the woman who told the police about the car with its high beams on, speeding past her on the night of the murder. At the time, the woman mentioned she mistook the ambulance sirens for police and thought they were heading to her boyfriend's house. That boyfriend was Michael. The police put his name in an address in the report, but back then, they decided there was no connection and didn't bother to investigate him further. Perhaps if the police had decided to speak with him, they would have noticed the cut on his hand, and the case would have been solved much sooner. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Courtney Holden. The narrative takes place in Spokane, Washington's second largest city, located by the river bearing the same name. The Holden family, representing a typical American household, has long been residents of Spokane. Judy and John Holden had 2 daughters and an adopted son named Joshua. The adult daughters had moved out and lived independently for some time. However, their son Joshua remained with his parents. Joshua, a young man often described as large, melancholic, and perpetually gloomy, hadn't managed to start his own family and thus continued living in his parental home. The care provided by this family to children was unconventional. It began and ended merely with providing shelter. Judy and John did not spoil their foster children with attention or care. All foster children adhered to a strict schedule and were punished for any misdeeds. Judy's educational background and her own children's successful led guardianship authorities to trust them initially to place children under their foster care and eventually agree on adoption. The Holden family's desire for financial stability greatly influenced their decision to take more than 1 or 2 children under their wing, thereby shaping their unique form of childcare within this professional setting. On a certain day, a sweet 4-year-old girl named Courtney Corrin joined the Holden family. Born on February 28, 1992, she found herself in a shelter by age 2. Life there was not joyful, as for many children. Each new day in the orphanage began with a prayer. Children of various ages dreamily prayed for a mom and dad. One joyful day, Courtney's wish came true. Courtney moved to Spokane, and at just 4 years old, first stepped into the Holden home. She started living with Joshua and several other foster children. Yet, when the door closed behind her, her dreams of a caring family remained just that, dreams. If life in the shelter had seemed sad and joyless to Courtney, it turned into a real nightmare at the Holdens. From early childhood, she was forced to do all kinds of housework. Cleaning the entire house and washing dishes after every meal became routine. Any mistake led to punishment. It was especially surprising how differently the Holdens treated the other foster children. They were much kinder, and no one understood their harshness toward Courtney. Judy Holden was considerably older by then, and Courtney was the last child they took from the orphanage. Perhaps this masked an inexplicable malice toward her. Courtney couldn't step outside without permission. Visitors often heard Judy and Joshua mistreating her, calling her Cinderella, as if she were a fairy tale character enslaved by evil sisters and stepmother. Despite this oppressive environment, Courtney remained responsive over the years, but got used to harsh conditions. She feared her foster mother while Joshua instilled terror merely with his presence. He forbade her from socializing with peers and deprived her of modern conveniences such as a mobile phone. This paints a dark picture of Courtney's upbringing in an environment where care should have blossomed, but instead turned to confinement and distress for this young girl. She seldom left the house without necessity and permission. Enjoying a breath of fresh air or chatting with neighbors was something she only did when the house empty. Over time, as she matured into adulthood, she grew accustomed to this lifestyle. She did not become resentful. Instead, she always treated her foster parents with respect, knowing no other life and having no concept of a typical family. Courtney gained a bit of freedom when Joshua, through irreconcilable differences with their parents, moved to his sister's place for an extended period. For Courtney, this was the happiest time of her life, as she finally experienced a taste of freedom. She could freely leave the house, stroll around, and meet peers. Time passed, Courtney completed school and fell in love for the first time. Michael became a noteworthy partner for her. She felt care and attention from him that she had never received from anyone else. After each meeting, Courtney felt like she was on cloud nine. Their relationship continued until 2011, when they had a son together. Michael desperately pleaded with his beloved to move in with him and live as a full family. However, for some unknown reason, the young mother refused him and did not move out, continuing instead to reside in Holden's house, which she despised immensely. This decision also marked the end of her romantic relationship with Michael. By that time, the Holden house had become nearly empty as the foster children had grown up and moved out. John Holden, Courtney's foster father, had passed away. For a considerable period thereafter, she lived only with her foster mother, Judy, and her child. Michael was allowed to visit his son, only with Judy's permission. In the period following Courtney's brother Joshua's absence after their father's death in 2014, Joshua returned home and began fiercely terrorizing the family environment. He installed numerous surveillance cameras around their home on Hero Avenue, about a block from Rogers Middle School in Northeast Spokane. Signs bearing, "Smile, you're on camera," were scattered all over the yard, with multiple cameras pointing in different directions. The presence of these surveillance measures made Courtney anxious again, as it implied hostile repercussions from Joshua if she ventured outside. Courtney's life became intolerable once more around 2015, when she confided in a neighbor that she wasn't allowed to have a mobile phone or manage social media accounts or communicate with anyone outside. Courtney's family couldn't drive a car or even leave the house without Joshua's permission. Joshua Holden was so embittered by the birth of her child that he forced her to cease all contact with her son's father. Courtney complied silently. Neighbors began to notice bruises on Courtney's face and arms. When asked about these injuries, she admitted candidly that Joshua hit her. Concerned neighbors wondered why Courtney tolerated such treatment and tried in various ways to help her. They contacted the police to draw attention to her plight, but the Holdens quashed each case because Courtney never openly admitted she was under family terror from her brother. Eventually, Courtney was stripped of the privilege of speaking with neighbors. Since then, they only saw her outside during the evenings, as she wasn't allowed out during day. Again, she silently obeyed. No one knew Joshua like Courtney did. He was tall, large, overweight, and possessed enormous physical strength. His friends described him as paranoid, cruel, and unpredictable in nature. He once bragged publicly about his ability to end life easily and dispose of a body without difficulty. Joshua had a notable criminal record. In 2005, he was charged with assault and harassment, but was released due to a lack of evidence and the victim's unwillingness to cooperate with the police. He was also suspected of an assault and misconduct against a woman in 2003, when the perpetrator couldn't be identified. In 2006, Joshua was arrested for domestic violence against his mother and burglary. These incidents prompted his flight from the parental home for several years. Upon his return, Joshua became even more ferocious. He installed cameras not just outside but also inside the house to maintain complete control over Courtney. She was afraid to go anywhere, fearing Joshua would find out and things would escalate. One person communicated with Courtney daily through Facebook until Joshua discovered she had an account. "I have to go. I must leave. Josh is coming," she said in her last message nearly years ago. Then her went dark permanently. The dynamics within the Holden household were described by family acquaintances as peculiar. Those familiar with the family were puzzled as to why Courtney's child referred to Judy as mom and Joshua as dad, while his biological mother was addressed strictly by her first name. This led some to speculate that perhaps Joshua was indeed the child's father. Neighbors and acquaintances condemned the Holdens for their unusual lifestyle and antisocial behavior, opting to steer clear of their home. In August 2018, following yet another dispute, Courtney hastily packed her belongings into a suitcase and ran out onto the street. An irate Judy shouted after her, "Come back home," to which Courtney replied, "I won't stay here anymore." Moments later, an enraged Joshua, standing over 6 feet tall and weighing 300 pounds, forcefully lifted 160-pound Courtney and carried her back into the house. Judy slammed the door shut. According to a neighbor who witnessed this altercation, she couldn't resist. This was the last time this neighbor saw Courtney. It took almost 2 years before neighbors and acquaintances began to worry about her disappearance. In October 2019, a year and a half after she vanished, concern for Courtney Holden's whereabouts came from her father and his current girlfriend. They hadn't seen Courtney for almost 2 years, and the father was eager to see his child. He filed a missing person report with the police on October 24th. The police, armed with a search warrant, went to the Holden residence and were surprised to find Courtney indeed not there. Neither Joshua nor Judy was willing to cooperate with authorities. Courtney's stepmother allowed detectives to peek into her room, but then asked them to leave the house as soon as possible. Search dogs were even brought in, but yielded no results. The Holdens claimed that Courtney had abandoned her son and ran away. However, they couldn't explain who continued cashing the Social Security benefits deposited into her account or who was using the electronic food stamps. On the same day authorities searched the Holden home, Judy and Joshua withdrew the remaining $600 from Courtney's bank account. The next day, a curious coincidence occurred. An unknown woman claiming to be Courtney called the National Center for Criminal Information in America. She stated she was safe and didn't want to be searched for. However, police traced the call and identified the caller as one of Courtney's stepsisters. Joshua and Judy later provided multiple contradictory stories about Courtney's disappearance. At one point, they claimed she ran away with a truck driver. In another version, she had left with a secret lover unknown to everyone else. The inconsistency and variation in their accounts made them obvious suspects. Their behavior appeared suspicious and indicated they were hiding something significant. By the end of October 2019, Joshua and Judy fled Spokane. This hasty departure only reinforced detectives' suspicions regarding their involvement in Courtney's disappearance. Authorities eventually tracked them down in Texas at the home of one of Judy's adopted daughters. In Texas, officials charged them with cashing benefits intended for Courtney and with identity theft, permitting their arrest and detention in a Texas jail. Initially intended as a welfare check by the Spokane Police Department in early October, Courtney's case quickly escalated into a missing person investigation handled by major crimes detective Randy Lesser. Detective Lesser discussed the investigation with the Spokesman Review following the public release of his search warrants filed in Spokane County Superior Court. This report on Courtney's disappearance is based on police interviews and court records. Courtney was officially declared missing shortly afterward. Alerts were disseminated nationwide, and several news broadcasts highlighted her case, triggering an extensive search operation. Despite visits from patrol officers and detectives for various reasons, Joshua and Judy consistently refused to cooperate with the investigation, a highly unusual response in welfare checks and missing person cases. On the day Courtney was declared missing, a woman claiming to be her called Crime Check to say she was fine. The police dispatcher also spoke with the woman claiming to be Courtney. Later, it was discovered that it was actually Courtney's sister who did not reveal why she had impersonated her, presumably to deflect suspicion from Judy and halt the search efforts. "I'm concerned that she might potentially be deceased," Lesser said in an interview with the Spokesman. Lesser expressed particular concern about Joshua's history of violence. Joshua had been charged with assault in the past, but the case was dropped shortly before trial when the victim ceased cooperating with the prosecution. Investigators were in the process of obtaining DNA evidence, and court documents from that case indicated that Holden was suspected in another assault back in 2003. Neighbors and family described Joshua as unstable, cruel, and diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. A neighbor mentioned that Joshua was unemployed and that Judy feared him. Joshua had also been arrested on charges related to unlawful imprisonment and domestic violence, and he had been convicted of burglary. Family members said that Joshua and Judy boasted about knowing ways to evade police. They also said Joshua made comments about how easy it would be to end someone's life and hide the body. People don't just disappear, especially when they have a child, Lesser remarked. Court documents stated that Courtney was a loving mother who would never abandon her child. Over the 1.5 years Courtney was not seen outside her home, Joshua and Judy told neighbors and family she was traveling with a boyfriend, an unnamed truck driver nobody met. Sometimes rumors circulated that she had run off with a fiancé. Other times she was supposedly just inside the house but unavailable for visits. Judy told Lesser that Courtney had been home just a few days before when he knocked on their door. In early October, Courtney reportedly left on foot with her son. When Detective Lair asked for Judy's phone number, she shut the door in his face. According to court documents, she eventually allowed police inside to see Courtney's room, but appeared very nervous. The house was extremely cluttered. Piles of items covered all available space on counters, Lesser wrote in the court documents. Similarly, Courtney's room was cluttered and the mattress was bare. It seemed that no one had lived there for some time, Lesser noted. At one point, Judy panicked when she lost sight of a detective behind a closed door. She ordered investigators to leave when Lesser requested to check the rest of the house for Courtney's child. Later that day, a neighbor informed Lur they saw Joshua, Judy, and one of Courtney's sisters leaving in a van with a child. Detective Lesser also found it suspicious that Courtney had not seen a doctor since October 2017, despite suffering from a chronic illness. Her last prescription was filled in July 2018, though she had been obtaining medications monthly before disappearing. Despite this gap in medical records, money continued to be withdrawn from Courtney's bank account each month, and her card was used for grocery shopping. Surveillance footage confirmed Joshua and Judy shopping with a small child. The cameras also recorded them withdrawing the remaining money from Courtney's bank account on the day she was declared missing in early October. By October 24th, Joshua and Judy had vacated their home. Lesser noted that the DVR from the home's surveillance system had been removed and the family's 6 pets were gone when police arrived to execute the search warrant. Mobile numbers associated with Joshua and Judy were deactivated in mid-November. However, 2 new numbers were activated on the account, with Texas area codes on the same day. About a month after the Holdens left, a neighbor called police to report activity at the house. It turned out to be one of Judy's daughters and her husband, who had flown in from Texas to check on the property. They mentioned they hadn't seen Courtney for 2 years and that Judy had retired. The man informed the police that Joshua and Judy had a child. However, Judy's daughter claimed the child was Courtney. In mid-December, Lesser traveled to Texas searching for Joshua and Judy. The police located them at Judy's daughter's house along with Courtney's son. Joshua and Judy Holden faced arrest charges including identity theft, interference with custody, using Courtney's bank accounts, and concealing her child. The child was found safe and returned to his father. No criminal charges were made against other family members. The police conducted a thorough search of Judy's Spokane home with search dogs, but found no trace of Courtney. Similarly, searches of the home in Texas yielded no clues regarding Courtney's whereabouts. Officers also inspected a vehicle and trailer owned by Judy, parked at an RV lot in Oklahoma. 40-year-old Joshua and 74-year-old Judy were detained in Texas, where they refused to be interviewed by the police and declined extradition to Spokane. As a result, the police awaited a governor's warrant for their return. Since the police could not establish their involvement in Courtney's disappearance, Joshua and Judy were likely released. This is probably one of the deepest missing person cases lesser stated regarding the month-long investigation. Despite claiming no involvement in Courtney's disappearance, police believe she is likely deceased, but remain unable to prove it. Although Judy and Joshua have been charged with various offenses, they have not been charged with anything directly related to Courtney's disappearance. Nonetheless, many still believe they know what happened to her. In addition to Joshua's known aggressive behavior, he also stated he could end someone's life and successfully hide the body from the police. Investigators believe Courtney is deceased, but they have not made any arrests related to her case yet. Summing up today's story, it's heartbreakingly clear that Courtney was unfortunate to become part of the Holden family. This young girl, who dreamed of family and love, lacked the courage to stand up for herself. She wholeheartedly believed that even these people who yelled at her, mistreated her, and forced her to work for them were her family. But should one really need to defend themselves from their own family? It's a profound regret that the bold claims made by Joshua Holden in public about being able to end a life and hide a body cannot be used as evidence of his involvement in Courtney's disappearance. Especially since after that fateful evening, when he forcefully took her back into the house, she was never seen again. No one knows what she had to endure in those dreadful moments and what atrocities were committed behind closed doors by these monsters who called themselves parents. There are countless ways to discreetly dispose of a body using various chemicals that neither experts can identify nor police dogs can detect. This suggests that if Courtney was harmed that evening, her spirit still lingers in the Holden estate, where she sought a family but found her demise instead. Her young son was removed from the Holden household and placed under the care of his father, where he remains to this day. Courtney Holden is still listed as missing. If you have any information that could aid the investigation, please contact the Spokane Police Department. Today we're heading to San Antonio, Texas, a city near the Mexican border that stands out for its incredible cultural diversity and tradition blending. This border location plays a crucial role, offering a slice of home for Mexicans. The name San Antonio itself, derived from Mexico's national language, Spanish, translates to Saint Anthony, which is quite fitting for the city. A highlight of San Antonio is the Trinity University College of Arts and Sciences, particularly the Murchison Tower. Standing at 166 feet, it was once the tallest structure in the city. One day, a young man walked into the university campus. He made his way to a women's dormitory on the second floor, found a specific room, and forcibly entered by breaking the door handle, wreaking havoc inside. With furious anger, he scattered clothes around the room, broke furniture, and tore apart books and notebooks on the desk. His rage was uncontrollable, and by the time security arrived due to the noise, he was sitting on the bed crying, a spilled soda in his hand. The young man was arrested and taken to the police station. The damage inflicted on the room and the university was assessed at $1,650. The individual apprehended was 22-year-old Mark Howerton. Recently, he had lost his beloved girlfriend Kaylee and was struggling to cope with his loss. He went to her room and couldn't manage his emotions. During his arrest, he cried incessantly, repeatedly calling out Kaylee's name. 4 months prior to this incident, Mark Howerton was charged in connection with the demise of his girlfriend and Trinity University cheerleader, Kaylee Mandotti. This story is riddled with rumors, questions, and an abundance of information from law enforcement agencies. But let's take it from the top. Kaylee Anita Mandotti was born on August 26, 1998, in Webster, to Tilak Mandotti and Allison Steele. The family was well off. Allison was a scientist, and Tilak worked as an international executive director at MGM Resorts. After her parents divorced, Allison remarried NASA engineer Lawrence Butlin, who lived in Houston, when Kaylee was 9. Despite her parents' separation, Kaylee maintained a strong relationship with her father, regularly communicating with him. Her stepfather also adored Kaylee and became a second dad to her. Kaylee was not just a grateful and loving daughter and granddaughter, but also an excellent student, team member, sister, and friend whose infectious laughter and kind heart could light up any rooms. In school, Kaylee excelled academically and participated in all extracurricular activities. She enjoyed horseback riding, played the piano, and even performed in theater. Kaylee was a Girl Scout, ran around the Clear Lake neighborhood with her friends, and went on hikes with her parents. In 2016, she graduated with honors from Clear Creek High School in League City, Texas. Kaylee loved animals and joyfully participated in a volunteer group called Animal Therapy. She was always eager to explore new and uncharted territories, dreamed of trying extreme sports, and was constantly in search of thrilling experiences. At 19, the slender, dark-haired Kaylee was already a sophomore at Trinity University in San Antonio, where she was studying communications. She was well-liked with many friends and led the football team's cheerleading squad. Her vibrant and radiant beauty attracted many admirers. One day, during a football game where she was cheering for the Trinity team, she met 22-year-old Mark Howerton. The tall, bright athlete and professional baseball player failed to catch Kaylee's eye at first, since she was smitten with Jet and paid no attention to anyone else. But Mark fell for her at first sight, captivated by her large black eyes and the charisma that set her apart from the rest of the cheer squad. Their first meeting didn't go well, nor did their second. However, Mark persisted, and by September 2017, they officially started dating. From the beginning, their friends and acquaintances deemed them an ill-matched pair, as both were too emotional and quick-tempered. Their relationship lacked compromise, marked from the start by tumultuous arguments and confrontations. The young, passionate couple was constantly jealous and quarreled often. Friends who observed their relationship reported that Kaylee frequently had bruises on her arms and legs. A close friend also shared about an incident that deeply frightened her. Kaylee once asked her to retrieve her mobile phone from Mark because she was too scared to do it herself. The situation escalated to the point where Mark became aggressive, brandishing a gun and threatening violence. Kaylee was aware of her boyfriend's jealousy and temper, but always reassured her friends and asked them not to publicize their loud arguments, since she admitted she wasn't entirely innocent either. However, around 1 a.m. on September 24, 2017, Kaylee's roommates couldn't stand it anymore and called the police. They heard loud noises coming from Kaylee's room and a man yelling and threatening violence. The responding officer found Mark alone in the room. Kaylee declined to press charges, stating nothing had happened and it was just a lover's quarrel. But her friends believed Mark was using controlled substances, leading to uncontrollable outbursts of anger. He once threatened to throw Kaylee off a balcony. Her friends reported this to the police as well. Their relationship was like an ocean. During a storm, the waves were tumultuous, but in calm weather, they were blissfully in love. On October 29th, Mark and Kaylee went to the Malaluna Music Festival in San Antonio. It's one of the largest music festivals focusing on Gothic, modern industrial, and dark wave music, attracting over 10,000 people annually. Malaluna is a hotspot for partygoers and those seeking solitude, as it's easy to blend into the crowd and disappear within its bounds. Mark and Kaylee had a great time partying with their friends throughout the evening. However, the unexpected arrival of Kaylee's ex once again drove Mark to the edge. They had a major argument and left the festival early. That was the last time their friends saw them that night. 6 hours later, deep into the night, Mark's black Mercedes pulled up at a hospital. He rushed out of the car, desperately waving and calling for help. The medical staff found a semi-nude girl in the front seat, unconscious. The car was in disarray. Kaylee's clothes were scattered about, and she sat slumped forward like a lifeless doll. Kaylee was moved onto a stretcher and taken to the emergency room. Mark informed the hospital staff that they had consumed illegal substances prior to attending the festival. This information aided doctors in treating her for a potential overdose. She was then transferred to another medical facility in Kyle, Texas, where a nurse specialized in intimate assault cases examined her and discovered additional bruises on her arms, legs, and ear. A forensic examination determined that blunt force trauma to the face and head was the cause of demise, indicating Kaylee had been the victim of a fatal assault. Consequently, police initiated an investigation to find the individual responsible for Kaylee Mandati's loss of life. Mark was the primary suspect since he was the last person seen with Kaylee that night. Yet there were no concrete pieces of evidence linking him to the crime. However, Mark cast suspicion on himself. With each subsequent police interview, he altered his account of events, drawing investigators' attention. Surveillance footage captured him and Kaylee in locations Mark had failed to mention. Furthermore, conversations with Kaylee's friends and family members revealed his tendency towards aggressive behavior towards her. One of her sisters even expressed being terrified of him. The police uncovered alleged incidents of violence between the couple, including Mark hitting Kaylee's head against a car window and trashing her dorm room at Trinity. Upon learning about Mark's previous assaults on Kaylee at the university, her parents were devastated. The mother of the slain Trinity University cheerleader, Kaylee Mandati, filed a lawsuit against the institution, alleging it failed to take necessary steps to protect her daughter from her boyfriend's attacks, who is accused of causing her demise in a fit of jealousy. The lawsuit was filed in the Bexar County District Court on behalf of the mother, Allison Steele. The former boyfriend of her daughter, Mark Howerton, is also named as a defendant. The suit claims that Howerton assaulted the 19-year-old from League City and was ultimately responsible for her fatality. According to the lawsuit, Trinity staff, its administration, and campus police were aware of Mark Howerton's erratic behavior during their relationship. It alleges that the man threatened to break Kaylee Mandati's face or inflict serious bodily harm. But the university took no action in the weeks leading up to her demise to protect the young woman. A spokesperson for Trinity University declined to comment on the lawsuit's allegations, citing the ongoing legal process. Trinity University's failure to respond to numerous reports of harassment, cruel treatment, intimidation, domestic violence, and gender discrimination led to the tragic end of the sophomore. Allison Steele's statement also mentioned that Kaylee Mandati's tragedy could have been prevented had Trinity intervened as it should have. The university ignored its own policy on investigating and responding to potential cases of violence and harassment in relationships, as stated in the lawsuit. After an incident in the dorm room, Mark was issued a criminal trespass order, banning him from the campus for a year, yet he repeatedly violated it. Additionally, detectives discovered many stories of Mark's violent behavior towards Kaylee during their relationship. For instance, one of her sisters recounted that he threatened to throw her off a balcony during an argument, while another claimed he also threatened to shoot some of her ex-boyfriend's brothers with his gun. Based on all these statements against him, the police were able to issue a warrant for his arrest, after which he turned himself in. In February 2018, following the discovery of Kaylee's room in disarray at the university, Mark Howerton surrendered to the police. He faced multiple charges including criminal acts, intimate violence, and abduction. However, he pleaded not guilty to these charges. The first trial regarding Kaylee Mandati's demise began in December 2019. Prosecutors argued that Mark, known for his volatile temperament, fatally assaulted Kaylee Mandati in a fit of rage. They also claimed that he transported her for nearly 6 hours before taking her to the hospital. In defense, Mark's legal team contended that Kaylee's end could be attributed to various factors. Autopsy reports revealed the presence of banned substances in her system, suggesting a potential spike in blood pressure or head trauma during intimate activity. Kaylee's mother recounted that the injuries and bruises on her daughter's body were severe, akin to falling from an airplane. Indeed, the injuries were extensive. Photos presented to the jurors of Bexar County showed the Trinity University sophomore from San Antonio, Texas, barely recognizable with bruises from head to toe, red marks, and scratches. Both of her eyelids were swollen and bruised. The only areas without any sign of injury were her back and the back of her legs. Graphics and photographs taken by Dr. Susanna Dana, the forensic pathologist who conducted Kaylee Mandati's autopsy, showed a subdural hematoma, a collection of blood usually associated with traumatic brain injury on the right side of her brain. Kaylee's father, Tilak Mandati, after seeing 2 photos where the victim was in the ICU in a vegetative state, surrounded by numerous tubes with her face hardly visible, spoke about his daughter with a trembling voice as tears filled his eyes. "That's my daughter," he said, "my only child." Dr. Susanna Dana stated that upon examining Mandati's head, she found a dent in her skull. Most of the doctor's testimonies focused on the cranial and facial injuries Mandati suffered, which Dana described as severe injuries. These injuries included eye trauma. Both eyelids were bruised, with the left eyelid so swollen it couldn't fully close. There were extensive bruises on both the left and right jaws, bruises on the inside of the mouth, above the teeth on the gums, on the lips and cheeks. "There were hemorrhages in both eyes," she said, showing photos of the inner eyelid lining. She concluded that the cause of Mandati's demise was a blunt object's head and facial trauma. Dr. William Anderson reviewed the autopsy results and disagreed with the conclusions that Kaylee Mandati had been attacked. "We don't see any fractures in the orbit. No fractures in the nose either. We don't see any fractures on the face. This indicates that there was no frontal assault. Instead, Anderson suggested that the young woman's injuries were more consistent with a fall and extensive medical intervention." Defense attorney John Hunter presented an alternative narrative, stating that the prosecution lacked sufficient evidence to clarify what happened to Kaylee Mandati that night. Proving Mark Howerton's involvement in the incident was deemed impossible. Throughout the trial, he frequently pointed to Kaylee Mandati's drug use, at one point referencing her treatment for substance dependence at a hospital. Jason Wallach, a professor at the University of Sciences in Philadelphia, testified that Kaylee Mandati had a high level of MDMA, commonly known as ecstasy or Molly, in her blood after her boyfriend took her to the hospital on the evening of October 29, 2017. The presence of these substances indicated that a person could sustain a minor head injury, and the effects of MDMA could turn it fatal. John Hunter, building on the above conclusions, suggested that the drug affects each person differently. Many people experience an increase in body temperature or an electrolyte imbalance when taking the substance. According to him, these conditions could lead to a loss of consciousness. The jury began to hear testimonies. That day, jurors saw a video and heard an audio recording from police officers, where Mark Howerton told investigators that he and Kaylee had an argument and engaged in intimate relations in the car before she passed out, and that they enjoyed engaging in rough intimacy. He stated he would strangle her during the act because she liked it. Mark Howerton claimed that everything was consensual. But where did these bruises come from and when? This question remained unresolved during the trial concerning Kaylee's demise in December 2019. Allison firmly believed that Mark Howerton would be held responsible for her daughter's end. However, after the 2019 trial, the family felt deeply disappointed. Although Mark was charged with ending a life, he maintained his innocence. The defense argued that the victim's injuries were inflicted during resuscitation efforts by hospital staff. As a result, the jury could not reach a verdict, leading to a mistrial. The case was heard in the 144th District Court of the state, presided over by Judge Raymond Angelini. When the jury could not reach a verdict, the case was declared a mistrial and dismissed. Thus, in the first trial, Howerton was acquitted of the charges, leaving the case unresolved. Bexar County District Attorney Joe Gonzalez, who had been handling the case from the beginning, expressed his disappointment with the outcome and stated that he would review the case. During this time, Kaylee Mandati's parents decided to start their investigation. They collected all evidence and autopsy reports from the police and focused on a small, round, pinpoint bruise near Kaylee's ear. Allison and Lawrence speculated that Mark might have hit her head against the car window, causing her to hit the door lock and get bruised. They hoped this would establish his guilt. Identifying a similar Mercedes, the car Mark was driving that night, Lawrence took photos, posing in a manner they believed reflected the circumstances under which Kaylee might have injured her head. With the assistance of Texas Rangers, they obtained records, 3 written affidavits under oath, in the warrant for Howerton's arrest on charges of criminal acts, aggravated intimate assault, and criminal mischief, addressing many questions about Mandati's case and providing a detailed timeline of events before and after her demise. The slideshow listed key moments in chronological order leading to Kaylee's death and the evidence found during the investigation. Specifically, the timeline provided by authorities sheds light on Mark Howerton's alleged falsehoods to the Rangers and the evidence that led to his arrest. Throughout the trial, prosecutors portrayed Howerton as a manipulative and controlling boyfriend who constantly called Kaylee and took her phone away so she couldn't talk to friends. At one point, 2 weeks before her demise, Howerton pushed Mandati against a brick wall and in a fit of rage trashed her dorm room. Soon after, Kaylee told Mark that she needed space, according to texts reviewed by the jury. Howerton began sending her dozens of messages, at one point threatening to end his life. She pleaded with him not to do so. In total, he called her about 200 times that evening. Then, they attended a festival and argued over Kaylee's ex-boyfriend, who was also there. Mark Howerton took Kaylee Mandati from the festival, placed her in the car, and drove to a deserted parking lot near the Whataburger headquarters, close to US 281 in Sunset Road. GPS camera records show that the couple was in the parking lot for over an hour. Prosecutors suggested that it was there Mark Howerton attacked Kaylee Mandati and beat her to death. Kaylee Mandati's family thanked the Texas Rangers for their diligent work in bringing the appropriate criminal charges against Kaylee's alleged assailant. The retrial for Mark Howerton commenced in June 2023 after delays due to the COVID-19 pandemic. At the trial, the prosecution considered presenting a video recorded by Kaylee Mandati's parents, capturing her injuries in the hospital, but ultimately withdrew it due to potential complications and new disputes. Evidence collected with the help of Texas Rangers was also taken into account. Mark Howerton was found guilty of aggravated assault causing bodily harm, leading to legal case. The court sentenced him to 20 years in prison, with a $10,000 fine and restitution to Kaylee Mandati's family. Additionally, he was barred from contacting over 20 individuals involved in the case. Mark, now over 30 years old, is serving his sentence in the Willacy County Jail, eligible for parole in 2033. The conviction brought some closure to Kaylee's family, though they stated the sentence seemed insufficient for their loss. In the second trial, Mark Howerton faced charges including aggravated assault, causing serious bodily harm, in addition to the initial charge of manslaughter from the first trial. Unlike the first trial, the prosecution expanded the charges to include aggravated assault and criminally negligent homicide. The legal strategy was adjusted to present a more comprehensive case against Mark Howerton. However, dissatisfied with the outcome, Kaylee's family and prosecutors insisted on a retrial. Kaylee Mandati's tragic story highlighted the devastating impact of violence on a young life and her grieving family's quest for justice. This complex case is the focus of the article, The Final Hours of Kaylee Mandati, reported by 48 Hours correspondent Peter Van Sant. Kaylee Mandati's story serves as a stark reminder of the consequences of violence against young people with promising futures. Despite the conviction, Kaylee's family stated that the verdict does not serve justice for their beloved daughter. In 2019, Allison Steele, Kaylee Mandati's mother, successfully lobbied the Texas legislature to expand the missing persons alert system in Texas. She then founded the nonprofit organization Kaylee's Calling, aiming to consolidate missing persons alert systems. Steele also established a nonprofit dedicated to providing public information about the Clear Alert, an emergency broadcasting alert in Texas for individuals aged 18 to 64. In addition to these efforts, in 2021, she filed a civil lawsuit against Trinity University alleging negligence in protecting her daughter. Steele claimed that none of Kaylee's guardians were informed that Mark Howerton had trashed her dorm room. She also stated that the university took no action against him, allegedly giving him continuous access to her daughter and making her vulnerable to manipulation. It remains unclear whether the evidence collected by Allison and Lawrence was presented at Mark Howerton's trial in 2023. Despite being acquitted of the charge of ending a life, he was found guilty of aggravated assault causing bodily harm. Prosecutors noted that the family expressed satisfaction with the verdict, as they had endured prolonged suffering and felt relief that the legal proceedings had concluded, allowing them to begin the healing process. Losing a child is an agonizing ordeal, and sadly, it was a heart-wrenching journey that Kaylee Mandati's parents had to endure. Allison Steele said they are still completely devastated by the loss of Kaylee and asked those of faith to pray for her family, friends, and for justice in this matter. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Liana Friedenbach. Liana Friedenbach and Felipe Cafe, the young people involved in this tragedy, came from different backgrounds. Liana, born in May 1987 in São Paulo, was the elder of 2 children in a wealthy and respected family. Her father, Henry Friedenbach, was a successful lawyer and a well-known figure in the city. Felipe Silva Cafe, also from São Paulo, was born in July 1984, but grew up in a large, modest family. From a young age, he worked part-time to support himself and help his family. They met at school and developed a strong friendship that blossomed into romance. However, they had to keep their relationship a secret. Liana's parents, who were strict and religious, had brought her up to attend Sunday school and church regularly and were opposed to her dating at such a young age. Social inequality also contributed significantly to the situation, as she came from a wealthy family while her partner was from a poor background. However, the parents' prohibitions did not deter the young lovers from staying together. Instead, they started secretly dating in various locations where they would not be seen, just to spend some time together. In the fall of 2003, the lovers decided to take a trip to a secluded area to be alone for a while. They carefully planned the trip, which was meant to be an exciting adventure for them. They came up with a believable alibi to justify their absence and avoid arousing suspicion. Felipe told his parents that he and his friends were going on a camping trip. Liana, on the other hand, told her parents that she was going on a sightseeing trip with some guys from church, knowing that they would not question her further. The Friedenbach and Cafe families believed the fabricated stories and let their children go without any concerns. Liana and Felipe were overjoyed that they could spend a whole week together, free from their parents' scrutiny and judgment. The young couple decided to visit the picturesque province of Iguaçu. They packed lightly, bringing a tent, sleeping bags, some personal items, and a small supply of food. However, they faced a significant challenge. They had hardly any money. As students, they were entitled to free public transportation, so they planned their route in advance to reach their destination by bus. On the morning of October 31st, the lovers met at the agreed meeting point, careful not to be seen by anyone who knew them. They caught the first bus and, after arriving in another city in the evening, spent the night at the bus station. 2 more bus rides took them to their desired location. From there, they had to walk a few kilometers to a secluded spot in the woods where they planned to camp and spend a Felipe, threatening them, and Felipe, frightened, didn't even try to run away or fight back against the unknown attackers. Having thoroughly searched all the bags and backpacks, the boyfriend, Felipe, and immediately contacted his parents. However, Felipe's family believed he had gone camping with friends, so they couldn't assist in locating the couple. The situation was complicated by the fact that neither Liana nor Felipe had been in contact for several days, and their phones were turned off. Thanks to the Friedenbach family's connections and resources, they were able to mobilize the entire city's police force to track the couple's trail, step by step. Through trickery, they managed to reconstruct the route the young people took after running away from home. The police arrived at Embu Guasu, where the last bus had dropped them off, and from there they had to navigate through a deserted wooded area on foot. This was also the last location where their phones were still online. A massive search operation was launched, involving police officers, rescuers, and concerned citizens who had learned about the incident and wanted to help. A local businessman even offered his personal helicopter to aid in the search effort and distributed flyers with photos of the missing pair. The search party quickly found the couple's camp, but what they saw was chilling. Although there were no signs of bloodshed or struggle, it was clear that something horrific had taken place. The contents of their bags had been emptied and scattered about. Their tent had been sliced open from top to bottom with a knife, and the guys' phones were lying nearby. As the rescuers combed through the area, they soon stumbled upon Philippe's lifeless body. The young man had been shot in the back of the head at close range, and it was clear that he had never stood a chance. Although the chances of finding Liana alive were now extremely low, the searchers held on to hope, however slim. Henry Friedenbach actively sought the help of the press to widely publicize the search for Liana, ensuring that as many people as possible were aware of the situation. A substantial reward was offered for any information about her whereabouts, although unfortunately, this did not lead to a breakthrough in the case. Once the criminals had disposed of Felipe, they returned Liana to the same house where they had previously held both her and Felipe captive. By this time, the group of criminals had been joined by their accomplices, Antonio Gano da Silva and Agnaldo Pius Chino. Agnaldo, in particular, callously declared that Liana was now his property and that he had the freedom to do with her as he pleased. He then shockingly invited the others to indulge in their darkest desires with Liana, an invitation that was quickly accepted by the group. A day after the large-scale search operation began, the criminals relocated with their captive Liana to the house, a crucial mistake by leaving his jacket on Liana's body, which retained his sweat marks. He then took the murder weapon to his house, washing it and hiding it in the yard. He also tried to wash his blood-stained clothes so he could continue wearing them. However, DNA analysis ultimately linked the gang members to the crime, allowing the police to apprehend them almost simultaneously. The ringleader did not deny his involvement in the crime and instead chose to testify, bragging about kidnapping, abusing, and ultimately killing the victim, Liana. He provided a detailed account of her final days. Following a lengthy trial, most adult members of the criminal gang received severe sentences. However, the ringleader, Chino, was only 16 at the time of the crimes, so he was sent to a specialized juvenile prison with a relatively lenient regime. During his incarceration, Chino made multiple escape attempts and exhibited aggressive and inappropriate behavior, which led to a psychiatric evaluation. The examination revealed several mental abnormalities, which cumulatively turned him into a calculating sadist and murderer devoid of pity or remorse. Chino, responsible for the murder of young men, was sent to a secure medical facility for mandatory treatment and rehabilitation despite the family's numerous appeals. His living conditions are now comfortable, with a private room featuring a large TV, internet access, and a comfortable bed with an orthopedic mattress. He receives 4 balanced meals a day with a customized menu, and his monthly maintenance costs around approximately $2,500. In recent years, Chino has repeatedly requested his release, arguing that he has completed his treatment and no longer poses a threat to anyone, allowing him to resume his normal life.